Call the meeting to order. Good afternoon and welcome to the monthly meeting of the City of Des Moines Zoning Board of Adjustment. This board has power under Iowa law and the zoning ordinance of the City of Des Moines to hear requests for variances and exceptions from the regulations in the zoning ordinance, conditional use permits, and appeals from the decisions of the staff and the administration on the zoning ordinance, and to make decisions in such matters. This is an open and informal meeting and is currently being recorded. The board members have received a copy of the agenda, staff report, and recommendations. Copies of these are available in the trays on my far left by the door. We'll have a full 7-member board. I'll start with the introduction on my left is Jake Christensen. Next to him is Mel Pins. Next to him is Linda Westergaard. On my far right will be Brooke Rosenberg. Next to him will be Cindy Smith. Next to her is Cherie Mortiz. My name is Bill Gray. Representing City Legal today we have Michael Kelly. And representing City staff we have Bert Drost, City Planner, Eric Lundy, City Planner, and Sue Ann Donovan, the Zoning Enforcement Officer. The board is required to base its decisions in each case upon the criteria established by law for the type of relief sought by the applicant. The law applicable to each case is identified in the written staff report. If the facts as determined by the board demonstrate that the criteria established by law for granting the relief have been satisfied, then the board must grant the relief. Otherwise, the board must deny the relief. All speakers are requested to focus their comments upon those facts that demonstrate whether or not the criteria established by law have been satisfied. Each appeal will be announced in order, and the staff will present a brief explanation of the appeal. Any written comments received by the staff prior to the hearing will be distributed to the board or otherwise identified. All speakers that are requested to speak from this podium over here on my right and begin their presentation by giving both their name and address. The applicant or representative of the applicant will be allowed to speak first and will be allowed 10 minutes to present their appeal. Anyone else present in support of the appeal will then be allowed 5 minutes each to present his or her comments. Anyone present in opposition to the appeal will then be allowed 5 minutes each to present his or her comments. The applicant then will be allowed 3 minutes for rebuttal or other closing comments. The meeting will then be closed to public comment, and the board will deliberate, you threw a curve at me there, deliberate the request and make a decision. If your appeal is approved, we ask that you wait until tomorrow to go to the Permit and Development Center to apply for any building permits. Items listed on the consent portion of the agenda will not be individually discussed and will be considered for approval in accordance with the recommendation in the staff report, unless an individual present or a member of the board requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda and separately considered under the public hearing agenda. The decisions of this board can only be appealed to the Polk County District Court. If you believe you have been harmed by an error made by this board, your only remedy is to seek relief through the district court within 30 days of the filing of the board's decision and order. If you believe the zoning regulations applied by this board are wrong, you may petition the City Council to change those regulations. All material written or otherwise used today as part of any presentation will become a permanent part of the record and will not be returned. If you have cell phones on out there, we ask that you turn them off or at least put them on vibrate because it gets very disruptive to the process here. If we need to, we'll take a short break around the 3 or 3:30 time frame. Now, as I mentioned, there is a consent agenda that we vote on. I'm going to read those off. We do have correspondence on item 4. Did everybody get that from the Merle Hay Neighborhood Association? Okay. Items on the consent agenda today are item 1, an exception at 2505 Bennett. Item 2 is an exception at 4901 Harwood Drive. Item 3 is an exception at 3730 Chicago Avenue. Item 4 is a variance in the vicinity of 3850 Merle Hay Road. And item 5 is a variance at 100 East Euclid. As I said, these are going to be considered to be voted all at once. Is there anybody out here present that's here to speak about any of those 5 items that I just mentioned? Okay, anybody on the board have any objections? I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda then.
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to approve the variances and exceptions requested in items 1 through 5 on the consent agenda, subject to the staff recommendations and notes.
Thank you, Mel. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. So if you're here on items 1 through 5, they've been approved. You're welcome to sit through and watch your city government at work, or you can go out and enjoy a rainy afternoon. Thank you. Item 6 is an exception at 7695 Southeast 14th, and that's been carried over from the February 27th meeting.
Correct, and also only the request for the garage height was carried over.
Okay.
As at that last meeting,
Everything
the
else?
special permit was withdrawn. So the appellant is only asking for an accessory building in this
Okay.
case. So that they can go 8 foot over the maximum 17 that's normally allowed for accessory buildings. I did want to give you the cards. The subject property is on Southeast 14th Street, south of Army Post Road. It's not the main highway diverts over to the east, but Southeast 14th continues south. It actually tees off to the north of here with Highway 65, 69. That's an aerial of the property. The southern portion is in a flood hazard area, right through here. There's also a sanitary sewer that crosses through here, which has an easement that we're looking to avoid. So one of the things is to make sure that no structure is going to be built either in that hazard area or that would interfere with that sanitary sewer easement. Give you a quick view of the site from the street there. The appellant's house is under construction right now, so you'll see a lot of this is materials, I think, related to construction of the home. And I thought I had one other map here that give you a better impression of what the hazard area. So this light blue area is the area that's in question. Now, our mapping isn't necessarily accurate without a surveyed, engineered flood profile. So this wouldn't necessarily depict exactly. It's just based on the contour information that came off of the flood study as it matches up with our GIS mapping. So it's approximate. And same with the location of this red sewer line here. If you see it coming across, that's a public sanitary that again comes from Southeast 14th and goes through the property and then goes south.
And Eric, where
So right
would
now,
it
I
be?
think the area that we would hope that the appellant would focus the construction would be up in this area.
Do you have something, Linda?
I just was wondering where they were proposing the building be built.
Yeah, and I'll let the appellant speak to that. I think the initial indication is that they would comply with these considerations. I did put the floodplain development standards from Chapter 50 and the applicable requirements at the very top of the staff report, just so you understand. Accessory buildings in the flood hazard areas are looked at a little differently under those regulations than if this was their actual home. They have other standards if it's a habitable structure. So they have to do things to make sure that it's not interfering with any kind of flood water or keeping the electricity out of the potential hazard, that type of thing. So I just put those in there too so that the appellant would have those to reference when they came back for their permit. Staff is recommending approval of the exception, subject to any accessory structure being constructed in compliance with all building codes with issuance of the permit by the Permit and Development Center. However, we want to make sure that any enforcement cases are closed prior to issuance of a permit, so that'll be up to our enforcement staff if that condition is maintained. Any accessory structure shall demonstrate compliance with the floodplain development regulations in Chapter 50, which is the ones I just referenced at the top of the applicables. Any accessory structure shall be located within the east half of the subject property, shall not be located as to interfere with the existing 30-inch public sanitary sewer main. and any accessory structure shall not be used for a commercial business without rezoning to an appropriate classification or without further consideration by the Zoning Board of Adjustment. So that's sort of a safeguard. He'd withdrawn his intentions to conduct business on this property, but we want to make sure if he changes his mind in the future, that he would have to come back to the board or look for rezoning at that point in time.
Questions? Mel?
Eric, this is in an R160 district, correct?
Correct.
And before this was annexed into the city of Des Moines, I'm assuming it was just like A1 agricultural, or do you know?
That's a good question. The county had numerous types of categories. They had some
Okay.
light business that was very close to what we call our agricultural.
Okay, sure.
It might have been that, actually.
Okay.
I would have to dig deep for that.
With an R160, the general idea with the district is 60-foot wide lots, is that correct? And
Yeah.
single-family residences.
Yeah.
So that's what we might see develop around here someday?
Potentially, like, this area might be subdivided. I don't know if the other map might give a better sense, but
Okay,
there is a lot of property division that occurred
Sure.
at one time, and you can see like there's a land lease community here to the west.
right,
I'm
right.
whatever can be done to get that type of pattern of development, but there's certainly a lot of things that would have to work around. There's a number of acreages out
Okay.
there.
Well, that does bring up a point I'm curious about. Oftentimes people wonder and I realize this is like, the Southeast 14th, that is not the Southeast 14th traveled portion, but a lot of people wonder, well, how did Army Post Road and Southeast 14th get developed the way they did, with mismatches of houses and then a car lot right next to it, or a big building and then a little strip mall? And that's because over time, the city didn't actually, the way that I understand it, the city annexed those areas and that development was mostly already there. So now we've got a case where the city has already annexed this area, it's zoned R160. Why on earth are you supporting someone putting in a very large, very tall building in the middle of a R160 district?
Well, in the way, if you read our ordinance, it basically indicates that if you're over an acre in size, so acreages,
Okay.
acreage development,
This helps.
would be subject to no area limitation. So really, area of accessory structures is not a limitation here.
And
But-
I'm going to
yeah.
rephrase my comment, a very tall building.
Yeah, and again, some of that, I think, when we looked at this, it was due to the roof structure. I think I think the roof structure, that character probably looks better with the pitch that is being looked at.
Okay, all right.
If it was more of a flat roof design, it would look more like maybe a hog confinement type building
Okay.
or something,
All
so
right.
I thought.
I'll ask the
Probably,
appellant to
yeah.
describe that a little bit more. Maybe he's got some pictures or something.
Yeah, and I think we have I'll dig some a little bit, but I think we have an example of it in our
Okay.
file too.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Thanks, Eric. Applicant or representative of the applicant?
Hi. What he was saying, the area.
Before we go, I just need, for the record, your name and address.
Michael Cortez, 7695 Southeast 14th Street.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
It's informal, so we don't press on that. Go ahead.
I'm wanting to put a Morton building, style building in that back corner like he was pointing out.
You don't have a copy of a picture or
No, I don't
diagram?
have nothing
Okay.
with me today. I was running kind of late.
Okay. That's, okay. Mel, you got any questions?
Yeah, just a couple. Mr. Cortez, what would you be using the building for?
Just put a truck in. I've got a couple old vehicles.
What kind of old vehicles?
I got 3 Corvettes.
Okay. So since you don't have a picture, and I like old cars and have some myself, but they usually fit in smaller garages than what you're proposing.
Well, I've got a couple Harley Davidsons too that I don't ride, that I
Okay.
collect.
Those are smaller yet. This is a pretty large building with a pretty tall peak to it. Do you have profile elevations, drawings, anything? Okay.
This is something I brought in a while back that I have.
Okay,
You wanna put it back
if
under
you
the
lay it
picture?
back down there, then
Then we can see.
there's a camera in the ceiling, and then we can.
There you go.
Yeah, if you can just kind of point to
Sorry
it
about
there.
that.
No, that's
Okay.
fine.
Okay. So basically, you just want to store some collectible vehicles, personal stuff?
I've got a few,
Okay. Now, when you were in front of us before, you were basically, I think, wanting to operate your own business out of your property, and at that time, it looked like construction of this building would have probably been associated with the business. Do you
Correct.
still operate a business?
No. No, I've moved things to Carlisle.
Oh, okay. So your intent is not to bring anything back to here that would be business-related or
Not as of
anything
right
of that
now.
nature? Not as of right now.
Right.
Well, if the way this is being requested, you can't bring a business back to your property. This is a residential zoned area.
Okay.
But unless he looks to item 4 on the staff recommendation, then he has to come back before us.
Right, but if an appellant has an idea that they want to do something now, I'm a little
Oh.
concerned that we're granting them, sliding approvals here, and I don't really want to do that. I'd like to know what your overall intent is for the property in the future.
I may need to consult with someone else about this and
Okay,
push this back to another time.
okay. I'm just very concerned. This is a residential district.
Right.
And this is our last growth area for our city. And I don't want to wind up situations where we've got people trying to build subdivisions around a guy with a construction business and a bunch of Morton buildings.
Okay.
So if you're telling me you want to build a building to store some personal cars in, I'm all with you. If this looks like, yeah, well, then you'll be back down the line to have a construction business and probably use it for that, I'm really not interested in those kind of things. So, any other questions, Mr. Chair?
Any other questions for the applicant?
How tall is the house?
What's that?
How tall is the house that's
House
being built?
not being built yet.
But how tall will it be when it's
Be
done?
two-story.
So something taller than 17 feet.
Yeah.
To me, that makes sense.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Yep.
Is there anybody else here to speak in support? Is there anybody here to speak in opposition? Any last questions for staff?
I have one. Sorry, Linda, go ahead.
Oh,
When I read the report, it looks like there's been some zoning violations in the past, and the pictures that we looked at looked like there was a lot of stuff on there. Could we hear from Sue Ann, please?
I think there was a little bit of telepathy going there.
Sue Ann, Zoning Code Enforcement. Chair, Board, we have had ongoing violations at this property, and we've had a hard time getting a handle on what the owner wants to do with the property long-term, and it keeps sort of a moving target. I'm very concerned that with his past behavior and use of the property that he does intend to have a contractor's business again at this property. I think anything that allows that or perpetuates that, it would be a mistake. I think he needs to be very clear what he's going to do with this property and understand that he can't have a contractor's business there or home occupation in the future. If he's doing an end run around us, saying, okay, I'm not going to do it now, but I might do it later, I'll get a big building and then it'll set me up for that, then I have a real problem with that. I think we need to have some clear idea of what he's going to do, what he can and can't do, and we need to hold him to the standards that this is a residential lot.
Would it be your opinion then to continuance till next month might be in order?
If we can get it, if we could get the parameters of what he wants nailed down once and for all, because you have to understand, first he had the contractors there, we've been chasing that around. He came in and asked for a home occupation to do that, got a continuance, withdrew that, now he just wants a big building, but now apparently is indicating that maybe he would want a contractor's business there again in the future. So I don't think that we're getting a clear understanding from him of what he wants to do and what the limitations of what he can do. We're also struggling with the amount of things he has stored out there, which is an excessive amount of contractors and building supplies. Is it just for the single-family dwelling? Can we get a plan of the single-family dwelling and then say, okay, this pile of siding is going to go on this house for this particular use, and there's some correlation between what is stored there and what is going to be used for construction, and we're just not using this as a dumping ground as he goes through sorting out his contractor's business on this site, and there's no end game of what the products are going to be used for the house. I think it would be best if we could get all of that worked out here's the house plan, here's what stuff's gonna be stored here for construction of the house. The house will be done in 2 years, that stuff will be off of there. There won't be a contractor's business, the garage won't be used for any kind of business use. I understand storage of classic cars, that's an appropriate use. Is the size of garage necessary for that, or is it overbuilt for a residential lot? These are questions that I think we need to understand in order to grant what he wants, in order to stay in compliance with the ordinance.
Okay. Mel?
So the staff recommendation is for approval, and yet with your comments here, I would think that,
I don't always get to write staff recommendations.
okay. Is it a majority opinion then, like the Supreme Court? Okay. All right. While you're up there, if somebody does build a structure like this, let's say they just want to store cars in it, would they have to have paving up to the doors or tied into a driveway and all that?
Sure, as part of a residential
Okay.
improvement.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue-Ann.
I have a question for Sue-Ann, and maybe Eric would know, but from the pictures that Eric showed, it looks like there's a lot of stuff on this. Is there an active permit right now to build a house, to build his residence? Did it indeed, it burnt down, and I thought we could only have a building permit for 1 year. And I just heard you say if it takes him 2 years to build a house.
You can get
2 years?
you can get extensions on building permits if construction is underway and the plans are
Okay.
approved. I
Okay.
think there was a plan pending. I don't know that it's been approved, and I don't know if the building permit at this point has been pulled. I'm not up to speed on where he
Okay.
is with the house right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, we'll close the public portion, go to board decision.
I personally would like to see a clearer understanding of what's going to happen with this property. And I guess I would like to see I would hope that the applicant would say, let's delay it for another month. But I think for me to support it, I need to get a real clear picture. Like, this is my house burnt down, I'm going to build another house. I would want to see pictures of your business in Carlisle, so I know that you're not going to have anything to do with the contractor there. And I'm concerned by the comment that he said, well, I'm not sure, I have to check with someone else. I don't have a problem with somebody building a Morton building, but it has to be just for his personal items. And there's too much other stuff going on for me to support that right now.
Well, we'll get you up here in a second. I want to get a few more thoughts here first. Mel, what do you think?
I think I've made it pretty clear. This is an
Thought you
R160
did too.
district in an annexed growth area of the city for planned development. And while we do have a 1 acre lot here, the idea of putting in a very large building with perhaps a slippery slope here that we're going to wind up with a construction yard business here. Then in another 10 years, people are going to scratch their head about, well, how did Des Moines have this helter-skelter development down here? What's going on? We've got districts for those kinds of uses. We've had compliance problems, 1, 2, almost 3 of them here. And it appears today that either we don't have a formulated plan on what we're going to do with our property here from what the appellant has said, or he does have some plans for it, but he's not being forthcoming with those today. And I don't want to, put one foot in the door here, grant this, and then he's back in 6 months from now wanting to have a contractor's business here. If you want to build a garage to store 2 Corvettes and 2 motorcycles, I can tell you how tall the eaves are. I've built stuff like that. And this is a slippery slope, and I won't be able to support it as presented.
Would you think a continuance would be in order?
If there was a continuance, I'd want to see a real plan for this. I'd want to see where driveways are, where the footprint of the house is, how everything really fits together out here.
Okay. Mr. Cortez, if you could come up now.
I think I need to see a house. I mean, if it's going to be an accessory structure to the house.
Yeah. I
The
think we're
house isn't
trying to,
built yet.
we got a lot of questions still going
Okay.
through here.
I got some answers.
So I think you're hearing, at least from this side,
Right.
people are interested in seeing some plans.
Okay, Eric Corlick did my plans on the house. He passed away in January.
Okay.
The plans were thrown out. There were some things that wasn't right. I've got a new set of plans, Terry Haworth right now. He's going over some things. This next guy, he's off. So, I mean, the plans are in Terry Haworth's hands right now.
Okay. Well, you
So,
heard,
Plan is to put a house there.
Yeah.
That is going to happen. There's a lot of construction material around there to build the house. And I've had some problems with a lot of stuff there, and I'm in compliance as of now. They were out last week.
I think also what they're saying is the condition to have a home occupation may come about. And you said that yourself.
Well, I had that going a while back, and then I came into one of these meetings and they were denying it, so I was gonna put all my other stuff into a building, so I wasn't getting broke into. I got broke into on the property about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So it's a problem I'm trying to deal with, but there's a lot of stuff there. Because I'm trying to build a house, and I've got a lot of material there, and they're just coming and ripping me off.
Well, and I don't want to say
And I've
that
been
stuff
dealing with the
happened
guys
either.
from the city, and everything's been going okay. You know, they say, move this, remove this, remove this, and I'm doing that. But I've had 2 plans go to the planning place here, and they've rejected. The one was rejected. Eric passed away, so there's nothing we can do about that. So those were thrown out. So I come up with a new set of plans, and he's off on a couple beams on the property, on the
Mr.
foundation.
Cortez, we understand that, and you've heard that's part of what we want to see if we
Exactly,
have
that's
you
what
come
I'm
back.
trying to build the house.
But also, it's the home occupation. I know Mel has a big concern about that because you didn't give us a definitive, no, I'm not going to have home business. We need to have something better planned, so I
Well,
recommend.
Continues for a month or so.
That's,
I mean, I
you
can
know
get
where
things
that's where I'm
going.
going. Yeah.
And then get a better understanding of what we need to do here.
And Mel, you want to echo thoughts when he comes back, what you want to see to get you to vote?
You know, I'd like to see your own kind of scaled site plan. Doesn't have to be fancy, but, you know, where do you want to build the garage? You've got some profile elevations here with what you've got from Menards, it looks like. But where are you going to put it? How are you going to have a driveway accessing it? What's the driveway going to be made out of? You know, how is this going to fit into everything? As well as perhaps some statements from yourself about how you will be using it in the future. Because, again, you are in the middle of a growth area. You don't have this now. But yet you want to put something in that is not allowed in that zoning district, and that will change the character of the district. And so I'm very concerned about that. If you were next door to somebody else's, even if you were in the R160, I might go, well, hey, we've already got a mini storage unit right next to them, probably no big deal. Or maybe an RV trailer storage lot, which we have, maybe no big deal. But we'll wind up with a housing subdivision around you, and then everybody will go, well, what was Des Moines thinking with the way they do their continual growth? They don't plan ahead. We've got a plan for this area, and it's for R160.
That's very understandable. But I just think you was off a little bit. I mean, it's like 2.25 acres is what I have. You said it was 1
Okay,
acre?
well, it's an acre or more. It's
Okay.
an acre or more, so that's kind of what Eric said,
Okay.
so, yeah, but I appreciate the clarification.
And also, I think it'd do you wonders to talk to Sue Ann Donovan because she's also expressing doubt. And it's important that she's on board.
I've made a call to her a couple times, but I've never had returned a call, so,
Got a good chance to get a hold of her today.
okay.
Okay. So you were going to request a continuance to the June, what day is that? The 26th meeting. Okay.
Could I ask him also to come back in, and when you come back, tell me why you need a 25-foot building?
25-foot building?
25 foot
25-foot tall building.
No, it's only supposed to be 17.
That's why we're
Well,
here today.
Yeah. Because you're requesting to get
Yeah.
at least 20 or up to 25 feet.
No, what happened was the garage was the height was on the garage. The garage is already built. So I don't know who came up with the height difference here.
Well, this is another reason to get this straightened out.
Yeah, I think if we could give you, and I think we'll get to a decision on
Allow
that
me
real
to do a
quick.
17-foot high is what it's in question.
We're looking at least 25, or almost 25.
And I don't think he needs our approval to
No,
build
no,
a
17.
Morton building that's 17 foot
Okay,
tall.
something's wrong.
But
If I
Yeah,
get-
we'll
Yeah.
Eric, can you help us out?
I can't help you out because the building that I based it on was the building that's, we've got the elevations for, so.
Does he, but
Okay.
do you have a 25-foot tall garage
No, I have
now?
a 23-foot.
Was that
He
pre-existing?
already got relief, that's in the staff report for a
Ah,
previous
okay.
garage. It's
Okay.
already on the, it's
Okay.
built on the property.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
probably more of a residential type garage
Yeah.
Okay.
than the other one.
Okay.
This is,
Another good reason to defer, and he can
Yeah.
figure it out with staff and come back with
Let's
the-
do that, okay, yeah. Well, it won't, probably not, but we still need to get the, the home occupation resolved. So we're going to take a vote on that. We appreciate your coming back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mel, you want to,
Sure, I'll make a motion to defer this to the next regularly scheduled monthly meeting
June 26th?
for June 26th.
I'll second.
And moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries 7-0. We'll see you next month. Item 7, variance and exception at 2809 Rutland, and this was carried over from the April 24th meeting. And we have some changes, I see.
Yeah, item number 7, the proposal is still as it was last month, which would allow for the house to be reused as 4 dwelling units. However, there's an alternative proposal now on the table that would reduce the number of units within this house to only 3, which would also reduce the number of off-street parking spaces required. So if you go with the 3 dwelling unit route, then there would be fewer zoning appeals necessary. I'll show you the revised site sketch that's now under consideration. With only 3 units, they would be required to provide 5 off-street parking spaces. That's 1.5 per dwelling unit. Under this scenario, they could get 4 parking spaces, including these 3 here, and this 4th required handicap accessible stall. Plus, it would allow them to use the existing 2-car garage here. So in order to do this scenario, they still need some appeals, including an exception of 1 space less than the required 5, an exception of 5 feet less than the required 10-foot setback from the west side property line for these spaces, and then an exception of 2 feet less than the required 10-foot width for a one-way driveway. This driveway here along the west side of the house is only 8 feet wide, so they needed an exception to reuse that driveway. I'd also point out that right now the driveway is paved to the back point of the house, and then the area back here is just gravel. You can see here the view from Rutland. It's paved to the back wall plane of the house, and then here in the backyard it's pretty much a gravelled area. And this is that 2-car garage I mentioned in the consent map. And I passed around the cards as well as the letter from the Drake Neighborhood Association, and then an email I got from the Drake Neighborhood Association this morning saying that if they reduce the number of dwelling units to 3, then the Neighborhood Association would withdraw their opposition. So staff has recommended approval of this alternative layout for 3 units. And again, that required those 3 exceptions I had mentioned. There is a 4th and a 5th one that we're not recommending approval of, and that's for paving of the area. They're, I believe, still wanting to leave it as gravel and to not have curbs around the perimeter. So staff's recommending denial of those variances, but recommending approval of the amended appeals to allow them to only have 4 dwelling units and the reduced paving setbacks. So, are there any questions?
Bert, I have a question, Mr. Chair. Are the properties on either side, the 2801 and 2815, are those single family?
I know 2801 is. I do not know about 280 or 2815. I know it's zoned single-family residential. Back in 2002, when the city rezoned the Drake neighborhood, they left all of the conforming R3 uses as R3. So this property at the time was conforming with regards to the lot area. So it remained R3, whereas the properties on both sides were down zoned to R1, so single family.
You didn't renotice this, did you, Bert?
No.
So we're looking at some of the stuff from last month?
Right.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Thanks, Bert. Applicant or representative of the applicant? Did he know it was today?
We were talking his briefings yesterday, so
Okay.
I assume he's doing supposed to.
Huh? Is there anybody to speak in support? Is there anybody here to speak in opposition? Well, must have been a pretty important issue here. Go- Mel?
Question for Bert. Bert, when you handed out the materials for this, you've got a letter from the Drake Neighborhood Association, which they don't have dated, which is probably just a
Right.
mistake on their part.
That was handed out at the last meeting.
Okay, so they didn't like it then, but as of this morning, they're okay
Right.
now with this amended approach,
And
correct?
The email from the neighborhood, that Derek Gord said he spoke with Mr. Capone
Okay.
this morning. too,
Okay.
so.
All right, so the Drake Neighborhood Association's on board with this amended approach,
Yeah.
which would reflect your staff recommendation then? Okay.
So if we approve staff recommendations, they would have to pay.
They would, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's my question, so. Any other questions for staff?
What's triggering the handicap parking space? Doesn't seem to make sense to have a handicap parking space with a non-accessible dwelling unit.
Well, anytime there's a new parking lot, there's a handicap accessible space required. You do make a good point that at the present time, the units might not be, but I don't know if they have plans to make the ground floor unit be accessible, but it is an ADA requirement.
Yeah, I have an answer for that. It's actually designed for all types of disabilities, so anybody with a handicap pass may not need an accessible entrance. So there isn't a congruency between the building code requirement for accessibility and the parking. It's part of the overall UDAG provision, but the building code has other provisions that get certain percentages of compliance with improvements. So I think ultimately, yeah, they would mesh together, but we see that out a lot actually where we have handicap spaces required, but on an older building, they aren't actually required to make the entrance accessible right away.
Now, wouldn't it be that since this wasn't renoticed, that might be why there's not people here to oppose it, possibly? Because they wouldn't know it's being talked about today?
I don't think there's any neighbors were here last month either.
Right, but we did get some comment cards, and I have to tend to agree with some of those. I still think 3 is one too many. I just don't think it's that big of a property to plunk 3 units in. I can't support it for 3 units. I think there was enough opposition from the people in the neighborhood. There's some folks there who have turned these properties back into single-family residents, and it's a bit unfair to them.
We'll save that for the deliberations. Any last,
Yeah, just one last one for Bert. Bert, with your amended kind of approval that you're supporting here, they would be required to pave.
Correct.
And have curbing and whatever.
Yeah.
So in for a penny, in for a pound. If they don't want to agree to everything, then they don't get any of it, right?
Right.
Okay,
Right.
all right. So if he started to make modifications and didn't have his paving down or a
Yeah.
plan for that,
Yeah.
it wouldn't get approved.
Correct.
Okay.
I would point out that he does have enough lot area
Mm-hmm.
to have up to 4 dwelling units per the current zoning requirements.
Okay.
So long as he can provide conforming off-street parking,
Okay.
which is where they're struggling.
The issue
to
was,
get the
okay,
off-street
okay.
parking.
But he's not able to provide that, which is why he's here, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
And also, which is why we've knocked, or theoretically would be knocking him down to 3 units instead of 4.
Right,
So then he can meet that with fewer exceptions needed.
yeah.
But he still needs
He
exceptions.
still needs exceptions, step 3.
Okay.
any last questions? Thanks, Bert. Close the public portion, go to board decision then.
What do you think, Cindy?
I want to vote to deny.
The thing
I
that,
guess
yeah,
I
I
wanna
agree with
vote
Cindy, it'd be
for
nice to have it
staff.
go
They're-
back to single-family dwelling, but, you know, it's
recommending
pretty
deny.
close to Drake, and the neighborhood association had a buy-in on it.
Yeah.
And they actually got
Yeah.
talking to the guy,
Right.
and they're representing all the neighbors around there, the neighborhood group is, so I understand. But you gotta have, I'd like to have an ear to the neighborhood. If they're
Right.
saying they're comfortable with it, then, and they weren't before, so I guess that's kind of the leaning that I'm going on. Thoughts, anybody?
as much as I'd like to see these kinds of houses returned to single family, the amount of money that has to be put into it, and then the amount of sale value or, rental value even as a single family, some of these houses are probably just too large to make that work for anybody. So I can see in certain cases maybe a kind of a need for this balance. If we're reducing the number of units, therefore fewer exceptions, fewer cars, and he would comply with all the terms staff has put out there, that's going to be a lot better than the way it used to be. And we have a different owner, and I don't know anything about this guy. But I think a lot of the problems were based on the previous owner, and maybe this puts the new owner on notice, watch his P's and Q's. But if this would be approved, if he doesn't comply with every iota, he doesn't get any of it. So it'll be up to him to decide
Right.
if we would approve it.
And I agree, Mel, but I still think that if you have 2 units in there, that's adequate enough. He should be able to make enough money off it. It's going to be a rental property.
Okay.
I just don't think it's that large of a unit for 3 places. And if he went with 2, he wouldn't have to conform to anything. He could meet all the standards and all the requirements. But I understand going back to single family
Right.
is a challenge, especially when you're buying a rental property.
Yep.
Well, how about if we put a motion on the floor and see where it goes?
I move stack recommendations.
Okay, here a second.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Those opposed? Motion carries 5-2. And we won't see anybody leaving here because nobody came. Item 8 is an exception at 2012 South Lawn Drive.
This property is just off of Fluor Drive to the east, straight east of the airport. You can see the primary exit from the airport is right here. Primary entrance is just outside the front here, just to the north of the map, I should say. The subject property, it might be hard to tell. In fact, I think I have a better aerial here. Zoom in a little better. This gives you a better sense. There's 2 garages on the property coming from 2 separate drive entrances. There's an apron back here in the rear yard. In addition, this area was taken before, I believe they constructed another 330 square foot structure in the rear yard that was granted last July by the board. I'll let them speak to that. But so that's right. That's not really represented here on the aerial. The proposed layout of the drive would widen this portion up over here. And then we calculated what's also already in the front yard. Now, as long as these 2 segments were leading to existing garages, the code actually allows it to go over the 25% of the front yard. So the 2 existing are slightly over 25%. But when you're putting another apron off to the side within the front yard, then you have to consider that not leading to a garage directly. And so the way the ordinance is written, and then you can see in the applicable, we have to count that towards percentage above the 25%. So they're here to appeal that provision by an exception. I guess our concern here is when we look at the overall area of the neighborhood, you have a couple of, circle driveway, and the neighbor have a circle driveway. But what you don't have is a lot of pavement in the front yards. There's one example, I think, where there's 2 garages, kind of an attached and one off to the side, where they have a little bit of a wider area where they use to maneuver to the other detached garage. But for the most part, the driveway is pretty much a single width within the front yard area. So the character is such that we're not seeing these little aprons off to the side where people park. And from that standpoint, staff doesn't believe it meets the character. In addition, we're just starting to pave this property all over the place with existing stuff in the rear yard that's already allowed. You know, we're leaving little green space left on the property when it's all said and done. This area would also, it's hard to see, but there's a line right here where this would kind of flare out. This is the photo from the front of the yard.
Eric, I'm slow on the uptake here. You telling me this already happened?
This is actually the way it sits right now, I believe.
Okay.
We haven't issued a permit, so really they shouldn't have removed anything from the public right-of-way. I don't think we can prevent them from excavating their front yard,
Right.
building forms, but
Okay. I got
Looks
you.
like a curb cut, though.
yeah, they're widening they're proposing to widen the approach as well to make this.
Did they get approval to?
They don't
Widen
have a
the
permit.
approach?
No, there's no permit issued right
So if
now.
I started saw cutting into the city's curb, don't you think Pat Kazitsa would get mad at me?
Yeah, possibly, although our enforcement has kind of stayed while we're in this process, so.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's another factor
Okay.
that comes into it. But as far as I know, it's not poured and finished.
Okay. All right.
I'll let the appellant speak to that.
Okay.
I guess from that standpoint, though, we're just looking at it from a character perspective and the intent and spirit of the ordinance. I should point out that their reasoning for this is that because of the area near the airport is heavily parked on the side streets by people that want a long-term park without paying for it, I think. So they park on the public streets where parking is legal.
It's not. You have to move a car every 24
Well,
hours
I'm
if
just
you're
saying
parked
the
on the city
actual
street.
location is legal to park on, okay?
Okay.
I'm not saying that they're.
You
the
can't have
length-
long-term parking.
Without looking at any one
Sure,
situation.
gotcha.
But, so they're indicating because the side streets get heavily parked, they can't back a trailer into the property very easily or back a vehicle in to pull a trailer. So that's their intention for widening this to allow them to back a trailer. My concern is they would then park the trailer there for a period of time, so, which would take away from the character.
You can't park a trailer on a city street either unless it's hitched to a pickup truck.
Yes, but what I'm saying
So-
is, my concern is, we do allow people to park in the front yards in single family when they're paved. By widening this, it gives them the ability to put more vehicles into the front yard than what we would normally see
Okay.
from a character
Okay.
perspective.
Eric, I didn't mean to cut you off. Your final,
Yeah, sorry.
you're recommending denial.
Yes.
Okay. Brooke?
So one of the gentleman's reason was he can't back his trailer in because of the parking on the street. And then Mel made the point of, they're not supposed to be there over 24 hours, which I think is correct.
That's probably a police consideration
Okay.
in terms of monitoring.
How did this get to our attention?
They just came to ask for
Okay.
for what
So-
they wanted to do.
If the police department was doing its job, would he have to do this at all?
Well, what I can say is that if the police department was doing their job, people would just be circulating more often. I mean, the parking is there, people can park there.
But not for
We
over
can't
24 hours.
assume that it's people that are there longer than they should be without actually tracking that, but I guess if it's a problem, if it's kind of a problem for the neighborhood, I think, we'll have to make the police department aware of that they need to up
Did we
the enforcement.
pull the police report?
No. Again, there's no
Right.
indication that anybody's doing anything illegal. That's their contention. I don't even think their contention is that that's illegal. They're just indicating the amount of parking that's around prevents them from getting access into the driveway.
I have a question for Eric. The card indicated that this gentleman said that he had just bought an RV and he couldn't get it in and out. Is there anything, and maybe this is just not even possible, but in this picture I see he's already got a camper parked back there. If we were to approve this, could we say we could approve it, but you can't, it's a detriment to the neighborhood, it affects the character of the neighborhood if you park it out front, that you would have to park it in the back? I mean, is that possible, or is that even?
I think it would be a hard thing for us to enforce. I think you could put
So too.
conditions on it like that. We'd have to monitor it then to make sure that
Yeah,
somebody's not,
could
you know, leaving a
have police monitor
unattached
when
vehicle,
you're out getting
like a
parked cars.
trailer or a boat or something that isn't
but that's your only
Alright.
objection, is that the city's only objection, is that?
Well,
having-
the other objection is that at this point in time, I'd wonder, you know, we're probably over 50% of the area of the property is impervious now.
We've got a lot of driveway
Yeah.
there.
This part, we don't, the ordinance could conceivably allow you to pave your entire backyard right now, but this is one area where we have the ability to sort of regulate the character by the intent and spirit of the ordinance, by keeping that minimal in the front yard. And so we're looking at it from a character perspective in terms of our review of it.
Okay.
And that's one of the criteria for granting the exception.
Those pictures that you took, were there cars on the street then? Could you tell? I mean, I
You know,
don't
there was
see
some,
any.
but I didn't notice that it was, you know, heavily parked.
Okay.
I probably was there 10:30, 11 in the morning when I was there. But I didn't make that observation. I tried to look at aerials to see, was there a lot going on at the times the aerials were taken. I wasn't seeing a lot. If you look on this side, you can see that there is some on that north side, which narrows the, you know, it does narrow. I can see the constructive argument there that by narrowing down the width of the public street access, it is more challenging to maneuver. I don't think it's undoable. It's just a little less convenient.
Any other questions for staff? Thanks, Eric. Anybody here to speak in support?
Is the applicant here?
Yes, the applicant or representative
He
of the
speaks
applicant?
in support, okay.
I hope he's here.
I'm Joe Buhlman, 2012 South Lawn Drive. And my problem is with the people parking in the street. And I just got a 34-foot RV. And I had a 17-foot before. And on certain days, I couldn't leave without going where this new driveway is going to be, topping the curb and stuff because of the cars parked across the street and stuff. And it's very hard to back in when somebody is parked out there, so we thought maybe widening the driveway would help. But we'd always keep the camper in the back part of that driveway. And I have some pictures here. I don't know if that'll
Yeah,
read
I'll
it.
show.
You can just set them right down on top of the.
Okay, there's one right there.
You can just set them right on top of it.
All of them?
Well, one at a time is
Yeah,
good, if
one
you
at a
can
time.
show us.
Yeah, just put it right on top of the
each
other one.
other.
This one shows
And then we'll pass them around, but just set them down so we can take a look, okay?
And that, when those cars back there, I can't, it's hard enough backing out with just a car. But you're trying to back out or pull in with a camper, you can't do it. But it's very, extremely hard.
Now, you know we can have those pictures, right? Can you pass those pictures around? We're going to keep those
Yeah,
pictures. Okay, good.
Fine.
Questions for the applicant?
Mr. Buhlman, so it sounds like the issue you've got is you need more maneuverability to get your vehicle into your driveway from the street. But yet, with what you've started construction on, that kind of looks like an extra parking lane, parking stall in your front yard.
That's just so I can make the corner, instead of trying to jump the curb
Okay, so,
Driving across the radio,
okay,
trying to get in there.
I drive semis and have a CDL, so if you just wanted a wider curb cut and then flared that into your existing drive, I might not have any problem with that, but you're basically paving another entire lane in your front yard. And I've got a little bit of concern with that. And residential lots aren't necessarily designed to accommodate, trucks with 30-foot long trailers to begin with. I don't think it's easy to back a trailer like that in anywhere, no matter what. At least the parking, it looks like, is on the other side of the street from you, correct? Okay. If you've been having problems, though, with cars, even if it's your neighbors, you won't make friends with them, but if your neighbors leave a car sit on the street for a week at a time and don't use it, you can call the police. A car has to move every 24 hours in the city of Des Moines if it's parked on a city street in a legal parking spot. That doesn't always happen. I'm sure on the weekends they sit there, but in general, it's designed to keep people from storing vehicles on the street. So if you were having problems with that, there's ways to address that with traffic and engineering and the police. If you think you've got airport commuters parking there, airport, something like that, we could have traffic and engineering put no parking signs up no more than 24 hours on those streets. But what if we looked at something where you minimized the length of that apron? You could still keep that width of that curb cut, but then you flare it back into your existing drive in a little quicker fashion.
Like halfway or something?
Perhaps something, because it looks like the way you've got it designed, it just kind of stops. It doesn't even angle back in, does it?
It angles.
It does have an angle to it?
Yeah.
Okay, it's just a little hard to tell from the picture there. From like an overhead? Where it ends, is that an angle like a 45 that comes back there?
Comes right from here over to here, if it's 45.
Okay. If you weren't maneuvering your trailer, would you plan to park vehicles there?
We only have 2 vehicles, and there's
Okay.
plenty, there's one parked there and there's one on the other.
You've only got 2 vehicles and you have all that paving and all that garage and 2 driveways? Just 2?
Yep.
You got room for more.
Should build another garage, the way things are.
Well. Okay, thank you. Those are my only questions.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you. Anybody else here to speak in support? Is anybody here to speak in opposition? Any last questions for staff? Hearing none, we'll close the public portion and go to board decision.
I personally understand the concerns with backing in. I don't have a CBL license, but we have a boat that we back in, and thank goodness we have a wider driveway because it's a bugaboo. And if we had to contend with parked cars, which we don't on Beaver, that would make it horrible. So I can totally understand where he's coming from, where he just needs that extra navigating room. And I kind of like Linda's idea where maybe we place a condition on it that RVs not parked there. Or maybe we could even place a condition that nothing's parked there, but I don't know that we want to get that carried away.
That's tough. It just gets back to an
Yeah, we don't want to have
enforcement
to, create an enforcement issue, but, and just the fact that, yes, you can call the police when a car is parked there 24 hours, I mean, that takes a bit of diligence, and it's kind of challenging. I think every neighbor in the city gets frustrated with that when you have cars parked on your street all the time.
Other thoughts?
I guess I'm leaning toward letting Eaton do it. I usually don't do that, but I understand with the single lane driveway, it is really hard to back things in and out, I wish the other driveway wasn't there on the other side of the house.
Be a lot easier.
That would make our decision easier, but it is, and I guess I would lean, I don't have a problem if he does it. I think it helps, but.
And Mel, you mentioned design, were you thinking instead of having the angle to just maybe have a curve at that end, just to kind of dress it up a little bit more, so it's not angled?
I mean, it's just a little bit of an optical illusion there, and I thought from the plan I saw, I didn't see that angle. It just looked like it
okay.
stubbed and ended.
So you're good with what is there?
I don't know if I'm good with it,
Well,
but I don't know if I would propose anything different.
Right, okay.
don't think anybody was object to it. Did we have
No.
cards? No.
Yeah, grab cards, but no, everybody was in favor.
Everybody was in favor of it?
Yeah. Okay, well, let's throw a motion on the
Front yard.
floor and see what we got. Cindy? you want-
I'll move to I'm not sure how I would say, I don't want to approve staff. I want to go against what staff approved.
So we go with what the appeal is, approve an exception of 405 square feet
Yes.
over the maximum allowed 900 square feet of area used for driveways or off-street parking purposes within the front yard area.
There you are.
Provided he pulls all necessary permits.
And-
Right.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, been moved and second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
I'm going to vote no since
Okay,
it
so-
passed.
Okay,
Are we
those
still on?
opposed? Yeah, let's try it again.
Yeah, I'm sorry, because
Okay.
I didn't know where we were, whether we were,
It's been moved and seconded, so all those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 6-1. Thank you.
It still passed.
Thanks for the clarification, folks.
Thank you.
Item 9 is conditional use permit at 20 East 18th Street.
Item number 9 is located at the corner of East 18th and East Court Avenue. It's the site of the roll-offs of Des Moines. This site's been through about every city process there is. It was recently rezoned to M2, and they've also went to the Plan and Zoning Commission to get a site plan for a vehicle display lot approved. Since they're selling used like forklifts and construction equipment, they needed the vehicle display lot site plan. Another component of their business is that they sell and fix up like inoperable construction equipment like the forklifts and skid loaders. So in order to store more than one inoperable vehicle, they need to get a conditional use permit because that's considered a salvage yard in the eyes of zoning. So they're here today to get a salvage or a conditional use permit to do that. Here's the site sketch that they submitted. Eric, can you zoom up? Thanks. As part of the zoning conditions that were placed on this property when it was rezoned to M2, they're required to be set back at least 100 feet from any right-of-way for the storage of inoperables, and then also screen the inoperables. This area here that's crosshatched is the general area where they would be storing the inoperable forklifts, and then it would be screened on the sides. I do believe Mr. Holt's going to be pointing out in his presentation that there's an area where the entrance is that he doesn't want to have a gate to this, so technically it's not completely screened. So it'll be, I guess, up to this board to decide whether that meets the intent or if he should put gates on it to screen it. I believe staff's recommendation is that it should have gates just so the inoperables are completely screened from view from the public right-of-way. I have some photos from the site. You can see from these photos that the site is currently being developed in accordance with the approved site plan. So there's some paving going on, and they're putting in the required landscaping and screening. This is looking at it from the north. You can see the new paving here. They're still constructing the area here on the south side of the site. And this is the view from East 18th Street. And another view. This area, I don't believe they've started the construction on yet, but
It's probably too thick.
so, and we did not get any consent cards back yet on this, so there's nothing to go on with that. But staff has recommended approval of it, subject to 4 conditions, I believe. 1, that any inoperable machinery should be in accordance with an amended site plan that's on file with the city's Permit Development Center. 2, that the area used for inoperable or storage of inoperable machinery shall be completely screened from view and shall be set back 100 feet from any public right-of-way. And this is where the applicant's going to be pointing out an area where there's an opening in the fence, so it might not meet this exactly. And then 3, should be no dismantling of vehicles or equipment. Any future proposal for dismantling the vehicles would require an amendment to this conditional use permit. And then 4, the conditional use permit shall be subject to amendment if they become a nuisance to the neighbors. So, any questions?
Just a second, Bert. Mr. Buellman, I hope we didn't get you confused. I thought your appeal's been approved. You're free to stay if you want, or you can leave if you want to. And as I've been pointed out by city staff, wait till tomorrow to go get your permits, though. Okay, thank you. Love having people stick around, but if you have things to do today, go right ahead. Thank you. Sorry, Bert.
That's okay.
Questions for staff? I thought we kind of confused him with that herky-jerky vote, so. Questions for staff? Thanks, Bert. Applicant or representative of the applicant?
Tony Holt, 20 East 18th Street, Des Moines, Iowa. Our driveways on this here try to point out. First off, my understanding is now that it's an M2 property and the site plan rezoning, we're allowed to fence on the property line. Is that accurate?
Bert? That's all right.
What was the question?
The fence on the property line.
Because it's an M2 property, now we can go to property line with 8-foot chain link.
Right.
Okay. So that would happen. So there'll be a fence around it, and then the secondary screening, we would screen this shop area here. That's an entrance to an overhead door. And then as you come down, when you're coming in from these gates, a truck would travel by that, and then possibly, not possibly, but would and could exit here out to Court Avenue. Court Avenue is a boulevard, so we're limited to that access. And then on the bottom, we'd be bringing our semis in the bottom also, and coming across and up. And we've put the crosshatch area in, but the zoning would allow it. My understanding is we grow everything 100 feet back. Is that right?
Yeah, our staff recommendation doesn't really tie you to this exact area. It just says any area used to store inoperables has to be at least 100 feet back from front property lines and entirely screened. So if you did that all here, that'd meet the intent, or here would meet the intent so long as it's screened from the right of way.
I have no problem with screening. It's just where these driveways literally are. There will be an area that I'd like you to understand in principle. It's very hard to screen it secondary, but that's where I'm wanting a clarification there.
Would there be inoperables set right inside here, or would
Not-
they be
not-
back here?
not
that
in
would
the
still be
driveways.
screened?
No, they wouldn't be in the driveways. And this is a very hard enforcement one also because of who decides what's inoperable and operable. But, so we would store what's inoperable hidden, is the way I'm gonna put it. That makes sense. And the same on this side, there would be a screening, 10 or 12 foot tall, whatever you want there, on each side that would screen the basic inoperables that are there. Our intentions are to concrete most of the land, which it is getting close to, and the site plan allows it. There is a large reservoir that's going underground here. Our green space is largely in the back.
Mr. Holt, from what you're describing, at least from what I see right now, you're going to be within the confines of the 100-foot setback and everything's screened in. That,
Right, it's the only question I have is, do I have to have gates that lock in the screened area? Or can I put the material behind the screened areas?
I think as long as the material's behind the screened areas, you wouldn't need gates. As long as the material's just kind of around the corner and out of sight.
and I think that's kind of what you're asking, isn't it?
That's what I'm trying to clarify, sorry, I can't.
Could you kind of draw on there where you'd want to have those openings then, maybe? Just sketch in a little thicker line there?
The fence is gonna be here.
Okay.
So that's all good, anything,
So then north of that, you'd have an opening there by that existing ramp? You'd have that open up there?
This here is display area, and we can block it here, but we'll, right there, that can be blocked too.
Fine.
And then when we move over to this side, we'll block like this, to about that point. And then largely the storage will take place in that area behind there.
That's perfectly reasonable.
he's
That would meet the
in compliance then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Holt, you can live with the staff recommendations then?
I can.
With the
Is it you're
clarifications
doing-
that you
okay.
wanted.
Did you have a comment that says completely screened? And when you're coming off the railroad tracks,
Yeah,
I wanted to, I wanted.
sure.
We're with you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, and. So you'd have a screened area with two openings up to what, 20-foot wide each?
Probably more closer to 30 to 40.
Okay,
These are semi-entrances. This
Okay.
is not. To put it in perspective, from that black line to here
yep,
is 20 feet, and that's 50.
sure,
So I'm looking at a 40-foot that way. And this is 42 foot between the buildings. And we would, like you say, it might be pretty well impossible to see through the machinery that's already there. To see the screening that's gonna be there.
It's nice having an applicant have a smile on his face when he's done, so.
I've been down to see you enough. I've looked to work through a few difficulties.
And just chain link, no barbed wire.
No.
no.
What's that?
Yeah.
On
M2.
on the
Are they allowed?
inside deal, or does he already got it on the outside?
I'm just saying it's M2 and it's allowed.
Okay,
It's allowed.
yeah.
I'd prefer no barbed wire.
We hadn't got that far, but we haven't put barbed wire up in the past.
Sure, he would prefer.
I don't know if there's a letter here, but I have been to the neighborhood association and they sent one in favor of it at zoning.
You got it with you?
I didn't bring it. It's
Oh.
actually at me.
Okay. Okay. Good job of seeking out the
Yeah.
neighborhood group. That's always a plus in our book.
Yeah.
Any questions for the applicant? Mel?
Just a clarification, if we granted you two openings of up to 35 feet each shall be allowed within the screened area, would that work?
Well, not that I'm trying to push you, but there's actually three main driveways.
Okay,
There's the one off of Court Avenue, and
okay,
then there's one on 18th, and then there's
Okay.
one clear down at the railroad tracks on 18th.
okay, just, and I know you referenced those, but in order for us to help you with this, we have to be able to explain to staff what we're approving, where these,
Right, so
Where
I'm
these
asking
openings would
for
be.
all three openings is what I'm trying to
Okay,
clarify.
Three 30-foot openings?
three openings of 30 foot each then? Would 30 foot be okay?
35 would,
I'm asking for 40.
oh,
and I'm not trying to push you, but
That's the second time you've said you're not pushing us.
I understand, sorry. But we don't, this isn't little equipment we're dealing with.
Okay, all
And we
right.
are,
So 3 openings of up to 40 feet each?
as you said earlier, you drive a truck with a CDL.
Yep.
Put a 8-axle RGN behind it and come through. And
Now, that rating I don't have.
well, you just ask yourself, and
Yeah,
that's what
okay.
we're buying and selling. You can see
Okay,
distinctly. Besides that, I mean, you see some littler toys.
yep,
So that's why we're asking for it.
okay.
Or, I mean, if you look at the neighborhood of the contour and who's having to look at us, it's largely the engineers that are going down the railroad tracks that are gonna see that. So, thank you very much, and I
Okay.
appreciate your
Any other questions? No, thank you. Anybody else here to speak in support? Anybody here to speak in opposition? Any last questions for staff? I'm just going to take this one out. There's nothing in the recommendation about 40-foot wide. Is that something?
I can incorporate that in condition number 2.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
That's what I want to find out. Any other questions for staff? Okay, hearing none, we'll close the public portion and go to board decision.
How about if I start off with a recommendation? I'd move staff recommendation and just add to item 2 that 3 openings of up to 40 foot each shall be allowed within the screen perimeter.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. You're welcome.
Thanks for having a sense of humor.
Item 10 is a variance, 400 Locust Street. We have an updated page 2. And you're going to explain that to us too, aren't you?
Yeah, it's just, I just combined those things onto a page. We had a request this morning for a variation to the actual sign dimensions. So what you see in front of you is actually a revision of the appeal language to incorporate that. The net change in actual area of sign itself is about 4.5 square feet, difference from what was sent out with a revised notice. I should go back. Originally, the proposal was to put it on the east facade of the building and with the original notice. And based on that, we got a lot of concerns raised by residents, owners of the condominiums within the plaza condominiums. And the appellant came back with a revision to put it on the north side of the building at the top. So we sent out new notices. Since that time, we haven't gotten any responses, negative or in favor. Although we do know that they've got those notices because we've had inquiries to them. So, but I will hand you the cards that we get from the original notice, just so you had a sense of the concern about putting it on the east side.
Come on. Really?
Every red dot on here represents one of those, and the green dots as well. So that parcel would be the plaza condominium parcel.
These notices are for the original proposal.
Right. And what I will also do is send around the revised notice so you understand the language that was put on that notice in terms of what residents, should we have expected any response or not. We did get response.
You want to put that on the camera first?
Yeah. I mean,
Thanks, Eric.
I don't know if you're going to be able to read it from the camera. I'm going to pass it around. But we sent out a revised notice. But pay attention to the header. It gives them information if they're not really sure what that was saying, who to contact, and because we knew timing was of an issue here as well. So by putting it off another month, I think it would have defeated their purpose, and I'll let them speak to that. What's being proposed now is seen in this rendering. So that's looking from the north at the Capitol Square building. So that's the north parapet of the building. This is what's being proposed. The difference now is a larger R Now, the way, if you read that sheet I handed out, the definition of our ordinance requires it to be a rectangle, the tightest rectangle around the whole works, okay? Which, by putting another 8 inches onto it, it raises it 8 inches all the way across the rectangle around this. So it bumps it up to that revised area for the language of the actual appeal. So now they're going to ask for a variance of 161 square feet. They had previously, I think, been 132 and a half square feet. The difference is that 8 inches, okay, in terms of how that's calculated by the definition that you see in front of you. So we felt that that notice was sufficient, that we don't have to renotice it for that 8-inch revision, and that people understood that there's a fairly sizable sign that's being proposed on the north side of the building above the level where the occupancy is. Basically, in the C3 districts, the occupants on the first 2 floors are entitled to signage on the building at that level if they actually have occupant wall on that building. Sometimes if they're buried in the interior, they don't even get anything. So anything above the 2nd floor, if that's where they're at, they generally don't earn anything under the way the ordinance is written.
When was this sent out?
What was the date on that, Bert? Do you know?
It's not dated.
Last Tuesday. The last Tuesday, the 20th? 20th? 14th, I'm sorry.
Eric, this is on the north facade of the building, as you mentioned, correct?
Yes.
Was it ever proposed to be on the east facade?
Yeah, that was the original
Okay.
request. and
So that's
what
probably
got-
why the plaza folks were a little more
Yeah,
uptight.
and
Okay.
it was looking out over the new, what's been now
Yeah,
announced to
Kohl's.
be the Kohl's Commons
Right, okay.
project, so I think there was some concern there as well.
I can ask the applicant this, but to your knowledge, do you think they moved it to the north side so it was less detrimental, or it's just easier for people to see?
I think it was in direct response, but
Okay.
I'll let them answer that.
All right, thank you.
Go ahead. In your staff recommendations, you say there's a hardship by the applicant. What hardship?
Well, when the staff reviewed this, we looked at the language of what's reasonable, what is a reasonable, they're going to occupy a fairly sizable area of the building. And we believe that the intent and spirit of the ordinance, it was a reasonable amount of signage based on the proposed use. If we didn't grant them the signage that businesses that were occupying this much area in the building, we might look at a long future of a fairly high vacancy rate in this building, which isn't probably considered reasonable.
I don't understand why the vacancy rate in the building has anything to do with the sign ordinance.
Well, when you look at it, the variance test talks about a reasonable return. What is a reasonable return of the land itself, okay?
Well, but they don't own the land.
But this has been consented to by the owner.
Okay. So if I occupied 11,000 square feet in the Equitable building, I may have a hardship and require a
Yes, and
sign?
I think we've granted some signage for Nationwide recently. Did we do one for the Equitable building? Not that long ago.
What about
Maybe it was the
mine?
Financial Center. I'm trying to remember. Not that long ago, we had one at the top for EMC. That was it, EMC. So,
On their own building?
yeah, there's multiple.
Well, under my
companies.
example, what
Yeah.
would stop me as occupying 11,300 square feet of the Equitable building from asking for a big sign like this on the Equitable building?
I guess it'd be for the board to consider what's reasonable for the amount that they,
Do I have a hardship under the staff's theory?
possibly. If you would make that request, you would have the same right to appeal and make that request.
Okay.
I think we would look at it in those same terms, whether the amount of, what's the volume that you occupy How much of that is a return on the entire lease of the property, that type of thing is all taken into account, so. But you as the board make that ultimate decision as to whether you believe that having this sign is necessary or for a reasonable return.
Does the staff take into consideration, since you mentioned a vacant space, you take into consideration how many people would actually walk in to the tenant? Does the tenant need the sign?
You know, I guess it wouldn't hurt for them to do something to demonstrate that, but I guess we haven't questioned, you know, the intent or you know, we don't question what the copy says. We don't question the content of advertising. The ordinance grants businesses the ability to identify themselves. It grants them the ability to advertise. So I guess we didn't draw that into question.
I would differ with that comment, because we've had cases where the staff has said we don't like the content because this picture of a pizza is part of the advertising, which I don't agree with.
Well,
so which is it?
It's a question of whether it is or isn't advertising, but I don't think we questioned that it was a pizza or that it was representative of what was reasonable for them to advertise. Okay. We were claiming that it was advertising.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions for staff?
Just for I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, just for clarification, I do have one, and I know there might be a difference between whole building tenants or ownership versus, you know, hey, we're renting a couple floors or 11,000 square feet. But down in River Point, I had noticed there was a sign, I think maybe it was for Fox and Channel 23.
Yeah, we had a TV station or something.
Yeah, TV station sign. Now, that's a 4 or 5 story tall building, and they've got a sign on it. They don't have the whole building.
No, certainly not.
And they're not floors 1 and 2, I'm guessing.
And I think you have to also weigh the situation as to what type of business they're engaged in and what's reasonable. Is it, you know, do media outlets rely on a stronger recognition? I think it's fair for the board to evaluate.
So kind of where I'm heading, I've seen a media sign for a company that looks like they rent a building, but probably not the whole thing, but some upper stories. And unless that's illegal, somehow that was, I'm not sure if that went through us or.
Yeah, it's not expressly earned, and the intent and spirit is to limit signage, and then when there is need for, you know, exception or a safety valve, then they come to the board to ask for that. But I think it's fair, while not exactly criticizing or the actual content. I think it's fair for the board to evaluate what type of business is it advertising in terms of their need for advertising. You know, some businesses may not have an equal need for exposure.
I've got you. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Applicant or representative of the applicant?
Good afternoon. I'm Casey Port with Hubble Realty Company at 6900 Westtown Parkway in West Des Moines. We are in favor and agree with all of the staff recommendations. I would make a couple comments. As mentioned by Mel, the original proposal was on the east facade. We certainly respect the upcoming work in Nolan Plaza as well as the residents of the Plaza condominium. So that was the impetus and the reason to move it to the north facade. At this point, we prefer the north facade and would favor that location, and that's what prompted the changes to the north facade. Regarding the 48-inch logo, really just became clear yesterday and today that the actual font of that logo is not real clear, just due to the nature of the font of that R, and so that was the reason to just bump that size a little bit to make that a little more clear. It was thought that it would be just recognized as some white and red fuzziness from a distance without a little bit more sizable logo there. Other than that, we do agree with the staff comments. Julie Harvey with the Des Moines Register is here, as well as Kate Klein representing the landlord. And as was mentioned, we do have approval from the landlord as well as their consent. Other than that, we'd take any questions you have.
Brooke?
What is the reason they want the signage?
Well, you know, I think as mentioned by Eric, they would be the largest tenant in the building. Occupying space on 4 of the 8 floors in the building. And they are a media outlet, so they depend on a certain amount of brand recognition and awareness amongst the community. And so it's important.
Well, mostly, so they just need a space to put their sign as media recognition, or do they need signage for people to find them?
I think it's both. Julie could help speak to that, but I think it's brand recognition and awareness is important to them as a media outlet, as well as just location and an opportunity for people to find them.
Okay.
And Casey, just real quickly, could you summarize again, the size of the tenant, how many floors, square footage?
Currently, they have a lease executed to occupy the entire 5th floor, as well as a portion of 4th floor. It's just under 90,000 square feet in total.
And those are your top 2 floors?
No, that's 4th and 5th floor out of an 8-story building.
You have an 8-story building?
And so that in and alone will make them the largest tenant in the building.
Okay.
And there's ongoing negotiations right now to lease additional space on 1st floor for more of a retail, internet, and kind of a main reception and lobby area for them.
Okay.
And
All
the
right,
4th
thank you.
floor would be a storage space on 3rd floor.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else here to speak in support? Anybody here to speak in opposition?
My name is Doug Brooker. I live at 300 Walnut in Plaza Condominiums. I live on the north side of the building. I look directly at Nolan Plaza and Capitol Square. So I was here to speak against both the variance for the east and the north. I was really extremely pleased to see in this report here that it looks like the east side facade has been abandoned, which I think that's highly appropriate given the circumstances with the renovations that are coming with Nolan Plaza, and to have a sign there I think would ruin the aesthetics of what should be a nice gathering point for the city. My point on the north side is I just think it's a very bad precedent to set, to have any signage both on Capitol Square or in other downtown buildings or sites to be determined that may arise. I just think granting this variance sets a very bad precedent. Like I said, for other buildings, but particularly for Capitol Square. I know they're going to be quite a large tenant within the building. However, I'm sure there's plenty of attorneys, financial analysts, other people that have businesses in that building that are above the 2nd floor that they might also like to have signage. So to quote you, I think this is a slippery slope, and I just think it's a bad precedent to set both for the city and specifically to Capitol Square. And just as I've heard today, I think if the Register leases the building, and they're leasing the space, they don't own the building that they're abandoning, that they're moving out of. I mean, I could see the signage there because they own the building, but now they're leasing space. So why would you grant this to the Register and then not to the other businesses that may now want to do similar? And the other thing is, as far as the walk-in space, I've been to Capitol Square. I know there's a security guard at the 2nd floor, and you have to go through that to get up to anything above 2nd floor. So if they're going to be on the 4th and 5th floor, then I don't see that as them walking in to do business to get a subscription. So it's obviously it's their business operation. So you're going through security to get up there. So to me, the sign there doesn't represent this is where we're at. Come see us. It's more I guess it's the recognition factor that the other gentleman mentioned. So that's what I would have to say. So.
Questions? Thank you. Is there anybody else here to speak in opposition? Casey, you can come back and get 3 minutes.
I'm Julie Harvey, and I'm the Vice President of Finance for the Register. I think it's important that we do have signage. I think we agreed after the discussion on the east side, we were very agreeable. That made total sense to us to move that signage. I think we're an important part of the downtown, what we do, and being downtown part of the media. We are a large portion of the building. We'll employ 525 people downtown, and an additional moving probably up to closer to 650 people downtown. And I think that's very important, and it's important to the community. We worked very closely, obviously, with the landlord to do this on the building, and we feel it is important for us.
Brooke?
Was this discussed long before you signed the lease?
Yes.
And how long ago was that?
When we signed the lease,
Well, how long has it been in discussion?
how long has the sign been in discussion or the
The
lease?
sign?
The sign was part of the original lease, and the lease was signed, we started the lease probably, I don't know, a year ago probably, when we started down this path.
And you were aware that you had to come here to the Board of Adjustment to get the sign when you signed the lease?
We did.
Okay.
We understood that. I mean, we obviously first had to
I
have
just
the
wanted to make sure.
agreement of the landlord, and we have signed a 10-year lease, so it's not that the sign is going to be, that we're going to be gone, a year and the sign's going to be there, so.
Any other questions? Thank you. Any last questions for staff? Hearing none, we'll close the public portion and go to board decision. Wyatt?
I'd like to move staff for approval.
Okay.
Second.
Move staff.
Did I beat you to it?
No, that's fine.
I think Mel was, but we'll have Mel get a chance.
Well, there's,
Well, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
yeah,
There we go.
to go to Brooke's point, there is something to be said for controlling our signage and, well, gee, if they get a sign, does everybody get a sign? But I also see, Des Moines, our downtown needs to be a vibrant area. If none of our buildings had any signs on them except for unless you own it, that would probably be very few of them. And when we look at Overland Park, Kansas, Omaha, other place I travel to all the time, if you got a large tenant, they've usually got some signage on that building somewhere. And in a case like this, they've moved it. It doesn't stick out from the building. It doesn't stick above the building. I think it's about as classy as you can get. So,
I guess that I'm very sympathetic with print news. I think that exposure is good for the Register, and I think it's good for the community. You're a big tenant there, and I don't think that it really distracts overall. I would hate to see a whole lot more signage, but I really think that if it gives print news in our community a boost like that, I think I'm okay with that.
and the Register's more than just print, it's media, right? Yeah, see.
Is he done?
But I understand your point.
Mel done?
It's the readership that I'm always concerned about in the print.
I can't support this. I think this is way too much signage downtown, and I think it's a slippery slope, like the gentleman said, and sets a precedent. Why shouldn't I have a sign on the Equitable Building? I'm the largest tenant in the Equitable Building. I don't think that's going to look very good. We never even thought of putting a sign on. I just think it sets a very, very bad precedent for downtown Des Moines, and I can't support it.
I like what Brooke's saying. I do, there have been instances where we've gone, and I can remember dustless surface down on the south side, and everybody always said, we're going to set a bad precedence. Well, we do listen to each individual case, and we haven't had that flood of people coming in like we were told was going to happen. So I think we've got a good enough safeguards that if some other tenant there wanted to, they've got to come here, and I think they have to come and give just as good reason to convince us to do it. So I think I'm going to support it, and as a paper boy myself, who picked up his papers on East 9th in Cleveland, you know where that's at, Mel?
Yeah, but did you have bicycles then or not?
Yeah. We had the little baskets in the back, you get them out there and throw them.
But if we're going down this slope with, okay, I'm a large tenant, or how large do I have to be to want a sign?
I agree, Brooke.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the size of it or the importance of it. It could be, that's why I want to listen.
But if we approve this, we also have the staff notes that said they have a hardship. I do not believe there's any hardship, and I think that's another bad precedent road we're going down. And I just see this as the wrong thing to do. Nothing against the Register, although I've had my moments with the Register, but that's a whole different subject.
Right. Doesn't affect anything.
I just don't get it. I don't care if it's a Register or whoever. They don't own the building, and I just think it's going to come back to haunt us.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Jake.
I think it's bigger than whether it's a media outlet or not. I think that as a building owner, the building owners have to have the ability to give the largest tenant in the building signage. You go to any urban area, anchor tenant in any building typically has signage. And I think Des Moines has to be able to compete with other metros within, or other cities within the metro, and with other larger cities. And so it's a reasonable expectation for the anchor tenant of any building. This building occupies more than a city block. To have one sign on it does not seem problematic to me. We have the Traveler sign that it's a historic icon. It's giant. This is nothing compared to that, and it just isn't made out of neon. So I think it's reasonable to have one sign on a full block building.
Any other discussion? Yes, go ahead.
Just want to, yeah, I guess that I realize that it becomes incumbent upon us to manage this on a case-by-case basis too, and I think that we do need to recognize that, at least I recognize that, in my decision, but, I do agree with this.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries 6-1. Item 11 is conditional use permit at 100 Court Avenue. We've got a police report on that, right, Bert, Eric?
Yes, we do.
Item number 11 is a request for a conditional use permit, and it would allow for a new tavern downtown on Court Avenue, on the east edge of the Court Avenue Entertainment District. The subject property is 100 Court Avenue. It contains the 6-story mixed-use office building and then a parking ramp. And then there's a courtyard in between those two buildings. It was previously used as the courtyard patio by Buzzard Billy's, when Buzzard Billy's was occupying the lower level of the 6-story building. The current applicant wants to just use the patio courtyard as a standalone tavern. They would have some food sales, but they're afraid they're not going to be able to meet the 50% threshold to be considered a restaurant. So they're wanting to get the conditional use permit to legitimize it as a tavern. Here's the site sketch that they've submitted. That kind of shows the layout of the tavern, within the courtyard. Again, that 6-story building here to the east, the 3-story parking garage to the west. They would have the bar and then seating area here. And as the photos will show, there's the fence with the decorative gate at the north end of the courtyard along Court Avenue. And then along the south side, there's kind of an elevated walkway right here that partially screens the patio from the Brown Street lofts and the Water Street lofts and the Vine Street lofts that are to the south. Here's some photos. This is the view from Court Avenue with the courtyard with the gate. Here's kind of looking through the gate. You can see the entrance to the building, which used to be the entrance to the Buzzard Billy's. The tavern would be in this patio here. Just another view through the fence. This is looking down the alley or the driveway between the patio, which is opening here, and then these Water Street lofts and residential uses to the south. This is looking to the north from that driveway. You can see that this elevated walkway partially screens it, but I doubt that would stop much of the noise. And I know there's 1 or 2 comment cards that mention the noise that the Buzzard Billy's patio used to generate. And then here's the consent map. Most cards are in support, but we did get one in opposition. Staff believes that this is an appropriate location for a tavern. The next item on the agenda is also a tavern on Court Avenue, so I just want to differentiate this from that one. This one's located kind of on the east fringe of the entertainment district, where there really aren't any taverns within like half a block. The nearest taverns are like Shorty's and Sprocco, which are a block to the west. So we had some discussions with the police, and the police were in favor of this one because it kind of disperses the crowds. Some of the problems that have been occurring in Court Avenue in recent years have to do with large crowds congesting the streets, particularly at closing time of taverns. So the police were at least in favor of this because it kind of pulled the crowd more this way, and it also provided a nice connection between Court Avenue and the Riverwalk. So staff has recommended approval, subject to a fairly long list of conditions. I won't go through all of them. I'll highlight the main ones. Number 3, staff is concerned about the possible noise that could be generated on this patio. Therefore, we've made the recommended condition that the business shall have no outside speakers or amplified sound, except for when used in compliance with the Type E sound permit. And the Type E is just for a kind of a background auditory music. So the Type E doesn't allow for very much noise, just enough to kind of be in the background while you're having a drink or dinner. Yeah, then I guess the rest are pretty much standard conditions that we've put on bars, so I won't go through all of those, but were there any questions?
Is it, they're only occupying the patio, correct?
Yeah,
So
just
it's
the
strictly business on the patio, they don't have an inside?
No, they'll have to have restrooms on the inside, but
Okay. And is
No
it
seating.
operating year-round?
I would assume it would only be seasonal, but I would I'd ask the applicant to address that.
Yeah, when you talk about background music, would that include, for instance, like an acoustic performer?
If it wasn't amplified, yeah,
Unamplified?
right.
Any other questions for staff? Thanks, Bert. Applicant or representative of the applicant?
My name is Andy Massett, 7326 Fulton Street, Indianola, Iowa. One thing, we own Sabraco right down the street, and we don't have a patio at Sabraco. So Sabraco is a low-key fine dining restaurant. We plan to basically operate this patio as an extension of Sabraco, even though it's a half a block away. Okay, so I don't really like the term tavern. I know that we have to call it that because of the classification. When I appeared before the pre-app board, I wanted to be up front. I said, there's no way we can for sure guarantee that we will sell more food than alcoholic beverage in this business. So with that said, you know, we would probably have to go before the Board of Adjustments. We have a full menu planned. We'll have cooking equipment over there in the form of 2 grills. The food will be slightly upscale, a slightly more casualized version of what we serve over at Sabraco. So we will bring food ingredients. So the business is seasonal. Our lease states that it operates from May 15th to September 30th. Okay. It will only typically operate Wednesday through Saturday evenings, 4 o'clock to midnight. We do plan to have background music. We do plan to apply for a Type E sound permit, which lets us take music up to level, I believe, of 65 decibels. If that allows us to have acoustic music or a small jazz band of some sort, then we would like to do that. So I hope I've painted a pretty good picture of what the theme is and what we plan to do there. We do plan to serve alcoholic beverages, primarily beer and wine, and a little bit of limited liquor, probably in the form of margaritas, primarily. So.
Now, describe for me how you're going to do this. Is the bar going to be inside the building and then you're going to bring it out, or you're going to have coolers in the patio? Explain that a little bit to me.
Sure. First of all, in regard to restrooms, that's the only thing that will be inside the building. There's a small landing inside the building, which used to be the old Buzzard Billy's entryway.
Mm-hmm.
It is ground level, so it's handicap accessible. We plan to construct 2 bathrooms as an extension off that landing inside the building, and it will be completely walled off from the rest of the building. So you'd walk in those doors and all you have is bathrooms and that's it.
So there's nothing in the?
Nothing
basement?
else inside at all.
Okay, so it's just empty in there. Do they
Yes.
use it for storage or anything, or?
100 Court, the owners of the building, 100 Court LLC, I think is what it's called. They own that and have occupancy to that, you know. I think they use it as storage primarily, so we won't occupy that at all. There won't even be access to it. And then there is a bar still there from back when we had Buzzard Billy's at that location. So it doesn't have any equipment. What we plan to have is we'll have rolling carts that will hold all of our liquor and so on, almost like a rolling back bar that we will store inside that vestibule where those restrooms are. And there's no, they won't be in the way of anything because we'll be closed at the point we would roll it in there. So we'll roll it out, and then we will have 2 tubs that you ice alcoholic beverage cans in, bottles, so on and so forth, that we'll roll out as well and ice down. And then we'll have 2 propane grills that we plan to just leave out there and lock up, chain, something like that. So.
Anthony, Mel?
Is this a seasonal operation for you guys then?
Yes. We are doing a lease with the owners of the building that states May 15th to September 30th on the lease.
Okay.
The way things look in Iowa these days, I would be shocked if we ever needed to go later than that. And,
But
and
if maybe
you
the
need
weather's
that.
nice or something, you could.
Right.
Okay, it's up to your mutual agreement if you want to keep a truck into October or something like that.
Yes, we can extend.
Okay,
monthly
I just
at
wondered
that
in
point,
January
yes.
and February, how does the business model work? Yeah.
That was some good ideas that could work well.
And one other quick question, if the board chose to approve this, would you have any problem with the 10 conditions as listed in the staff recommendations?
The only ones we wanted to ask about, well, we talked about the sound already. The other one is number 4. It basically says that I or one of my partners would have to post their cell phone number at a public area.
Oh, sure.
With late night.
Hey,
I
dude.
mean, if you can imagine the calls that one of us is going
Yes.
to get all the time. If we use Permar security, we use on-point
Okay.
security, I don't know if that would be sufficient to post their number. I think we can get them to agree to that.
Yeah, what's acceptable on stuff like that, Bert?
That actually is required regardless of whether that was listed as a condition in section 13454 or 134-954C.
Okay.
This was recently adopted by City Council last September.
Okay.
It included these kind of like regulations that apply to any business selling alcohol.
Okay.
And it
For conditional use,
talks about
as Mike's.
Okay.
posting that contact information and like not dispensing liquor through drive-through windows.
Sure.
And posting no loitering signs, things like that. So those are
Okay.
kind of operational requirements that
Okay.
are applicable to all businesses. But we just put them in our recommendation just to be
Sure.
sure that.
You maybe put your phone on vibrate at that time of night or something, so. So
from that
it's
standpoint-
not an option?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Not really an option, but
right.
as far as who that can be, it's really anybody that the business wants to designate as.
So it could be
Okay.
Permar?
It probably could.
Okay.
I guess it's written as to be a manager or owner, so.
Okay.
or-
And Mr. Chair, if I can, while Bert is there, with both of them there, the applicant had a question with item 3 as well. You know, he said he wants to have some like ambient background music. You've got no outside speakers or amplified sound. Is there,
Less, except when used in compliance with a type E.
so if he gets a type E but says, hey, I want to have some little pre-recorded jazz music quietly jingling in the background, he could work that into his permit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like you, had mentioned, the class, or the type E limits it to 65 decibels.
Okay.
So it's a pretty
Okay.
background ambient noise. The other condition I was going to mention was number 1, which this isn't something we typically put on bars, but we did
Right.
this time, that the business shall operate with a full menu.
Right.
So that's
Yep,
kind of ensure
I can
that
understand that.
it tries to be a restaurant.
Yep.
In addition to a tavern.
Okay.
Does that sound okay to you then?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you. Been there myself a few times. I used to like that. Anybody else here to speak in support? Anybody here to speak in opposition?
Hello. I'm Isabel Osias, and I live at 118 Water Street. And I'm a little concerned that you haven't received more negative comment cards because I was present when several of us filled them out and mailed them in. So you should have some more. I'd like to just start by saying that we enjoy Sobraco. It's a jewel of downtown. We think that the restaurants and the bars downtown are part of what, along Court Avenue are part of what makes that a vibrant and enjoyable district to be in. And we're not terribly sensitive to noise. We share our summer evenings with Hessenhauser and Highlight, both of which have outdoor music, loud outdoor music, I might add, and we live with it. We don't complain about it. Our past experience, our concern is item number 3, noise. Our past experience with Buzzard Billy's was horrendous. There's something about that courtyard is long and narrow, and there are buildings on either side. Noise somehow bounces up back and forth and gets amplified. It goes into that alley. We have 8 condos with windows and balconies on that alley. When Buzzard Billy's used amplified music, the sound in our courtyard, which again is enclosed, so sound bounces off and somehow amplifies. The sound in our courtyard was as loud as it was in their actual courtyard. And I think that's just a peculiarity of the way the buildings are down there. A small jazz group sounds kind of harmless, but I would remind you that small jazz groups include things like John Coltrane, who is not by any means, quiet background music. It's not all Miles Davis. And I realize I'm dating myself here.
I'm with you. I listen to them.
Yeah. There's a difference between an unamplified saxophone and an unamplified guitar. We're very concerned about those noise levels. When the sound is in our courtyard and when it's as high, and I do mean it was high enough so that you had trouble watching television, hearing your own television, you had trouble sleeping, that affects I would say that affects a total of 26 condominiums, plus all the apartments on the east side of Vine Street lofts. So it was a real concern of ours. We would like to see no amplified music of any kind in that courtyard, regardless of permits. We would also like to see the number of days limited. We would like to live with our own sound maybe 4 nights a week instead of 3. Wednesday through Saturday seems a little excessive, considering also that we're going to have Ragbri festivals. We have all kinds of festivals down there that we also have to live with, where we have no control over their sound. And we would also strongly urge you to test the sound levels of various kinds of music before granting permission to do that. So, and I should also mention, I do speak for the condo association. I'm the secretary of the board, and our board did discuss it, and we were unanimously against the proposal for any kind of amplified music. Okay.
Have you had an opportunity to talk to the applicant at all about any of your concerns?
No, I haven't. No, I know that other people, at least one board member has discussed it with them.
Okay.
So, but I personally haven't.
Okay. Mel?
I've got a question for staff, so I apologize, but thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else here to speak in opposition? Okay, you've got 3 minutes if you want to give a response or...
Hi, I'm Sarah Middleton. I'm the general manager at Sobraco and will be of the property there as well. And I apologize in advance. I hate speaking in front of people, so I get a little bit shaky. I just wanted to reiterate that we are talking about a very different business than Buzzard Billy's was when it was there. We are thinking more in the vein of a Sobraco style, something, you know, a little bit higher end. I wouldn't say super high end. We want that Sobraco outside feeling. But, you know, one of the things that we talked about when we were planning, and again, without ever speaking to anybody who was concerned about it, was that we have concerns about volume with our patrons and what people expect out of us. And so, you know, the amplified sound, it got brought up simply because we wanted to look at it when we saw it in there and see what specifically that was speaking to. And that was 100% what we were already thinking of. It's not something that we feel we're being limited by in having it involved. Anytime that we have talked about any type of live music, we haven't talked about any kind of amplified sound at all. And that's not simply because we're worried about hitting a decibel level, but we want to be good neighbors. And we also want to be good to our patrons who are there, who are expecting a certain level of quality from us that doesn't necessarily go with very loud music hollering at you across the courtyard. We're completely understanding of special events going on down there. I should mention I've lived downtown 10 years myself, Vine Street and Brown Camp Lofts, so I'm very understanding of that situation and the concern that the residents have there. I think Full Court Press has a great history of being good neighbors and of being very listening to things of that nature. So I wanted to toss that out there. That's definitely something that we're all on board with.
Well, and I don't know how the vote's going to go, but I would think if you invited Isabel over for a coffee someday and get to know her.
Yeah.
One of the nice things that happens, especially if she's the secretary of the board, she can help out and get a lot more business coming your way if things look good. So
Oh,
just a thought.
absolutely, absolutely. And we did speak to somebody from the board at one point. Yes, and he seemed, I think, a little bit less concerned after speaking to us, and that may have been after your meeting. So we'd be happy to talk to anybody on the board who'd be concerned. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any last questions for staff?
I just had one. There was some concern about the noise from Buzzard Billy's in the past. I know that's been some time ago, but do you know or can you recollect if they had a Class E permit? Did they have some other kind of permit?
I don't know.
You know, are we,
Records either.
you know, if they had a Class E and were allowed to do what they did, well, then maybe I'll be concerned. Or are we talking apples and oranges here?
Chair, members of the board, Sue Donovan, zoning enforcement officer. When Buzzard Billy's was in business, we didn't have the level of control over sound that we do now.
Okay, good.
I know they had live bands. They set them up back in
Yeah,
that patio.
yes.
And there probably was concerns as the sound bounced around. The Class E is only for background music, not live bands or ensembles or anything like that. It's just for background music. 65 dBA measured at the property line. And so it's going to be measured at either end of that patio area.
Okay.
Hopefully that won't create such a decibel level that it would bother the neighbors. It's designed to be so you can speak over it at a table. So
And that's Class E, you're saying?
that's the Class E.
Okay, and it doesn't include live performances?
No.
So then they have to get a separate thing for that?
Yes.
What's that
And if
called?
you- It's a G or an A.
Okay, all right, yeah, that's why I always ask you, because,
But
And-
if you limit it to E and they come in for a permit for a band, we're going to have to deny it because there wouldn't be any right under this conditional use permit to grant the
Okay.
A or the G live.
all right, and was that the intent of the staff? You're like, hey, we just don't want to have any outdoor live stuff, we
That is
just,
exactly the intent
All
of the
right.
staff rec.
okay, all right, that's helpful.
And for Isabel's purpose, 65 dB is about how loud?
It's about speaking level, just a little bit above
Okay.
speaking level.
All right.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Thanks, Swan. Thanks, Bert. We'll close the public portion, go to board decision.
The only thing I'd want to note, it sounds like they kind of wanted to maybe be able to have somebody out there just playing a saxophone, and let's assume it's Miles Davis type music, but that would not be allowed with what's in the staff recommendations then. So I don't know if that's a make or break deal for the appellant, or if he can live with that, or maybe he comes back a year from now and says, hey, we've been good stewards, can we amend that?
I would just point out that the conditional use permit goes with the land, so while the full court press
Okay.
could be very reputable, the next
Okay.
might not be.
Was that part of your thought process? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you,
Well done,
Bert.
Bert. Okay.
And I'm not sure what the applicant thinks, but something for Isabel and others to keep in mind too. This is a conditional use permit, so if people screw up, it can get taken away. So even though it runs with the property, if we have a problem with it, we can just say we've had enough if complaints come into Sue Ann and she comes back to us with it, so.
Right.
Yeah, so it's
Always
not
got
like
good
permanent
safeguard.
zoning, yeah.
So can I hear a motion? Quiet group?
I'll second that.
All right. The moved and second, is there any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-1 or 7-0, Bert? Or Bert? Okay. Motion carries 6-1. You got that, Bert? Mel. Yeah, Cindy Mel. Okay, item 12, right down the street, and we also have police report on them, rather thick one. That's for conditional use permit and variance at 319 Court. Wow.
Yeah. Item number 12 is, it's a two-part item. They need two different appeals, ultimately leading to the same objective, which would be to have a tavern use on the second floor of the existing building. The two appeals the first appeal is a variance to allow alteration of an existing non-conforming structure. This property is zoned C3R district, which requires all buildings to be at least 3 stories in height or 36 feet. Since this two-story building has a maximum height of 30 feet, it's considered a legal non-conforming structure. So therefore, they're not allowed to make any alterations that would increase the non-conformity of the building. And as you'll see in future slides, they're wanting to remove portions of the roof and sections of the sidewalls and windows to kind of create an open air area on the second floor. So the zoning officer has determined that that constitutes altering a legal non-conforming structure. So then the second part is the conditional use permit for a tavern in order to allow them to use that open air space for a tavern. The subject property is located on the north side of Court Avenue at the corner with 4th Street. There's rows, as you know, there's taverns along Court Avenue, and there's also taverns here along 4th Street. So it's kind of right at the main intersection in the entertainment district, where there's already a lot of congestion at night, and especially around closing time at the bar. This first sketch shows the portions of the roof that would be removed to create the open air space on the second floor. You can see it's these 5 sections here, so it's almost half of the roof. And then this is the south elevation along Court Avenue. An example, right now there's 7 windows or 8 windows on the south facade. They would be removing the windows and then converting them into 3 openings. So they would be removing the area between these 2 windows, and the area between these 3, and then again the area between these 3. So, and they would be doing this on the south facade here, and this here is the west facade facing 4th Street. So they would be having 2 of those larger openings. They would leave 2 of the windows, but convert those 4 windows to 2 openings. And then on the east facade, which kind of overlooks a parking lot and then looks towards the Court Avenue Brewery building, they would be removing the windows and making 2 openings. And then here's the layout of the bar. So it looks like it would mostly be seating. I believe there's 104 or 106 fixed seats, including these around the bar itself. So the dotted lines here represent where the openings would be above. So you can see these would be the open air. If the board approves this, any renovations would be subject to the city's building code, which would be subject to making the flooring in this area waterproof. It would have to demonstrate snow load and all the other requirements the building code has for this type of thing. And here's, we can go through some photos. Here's the building as it appears today, again at the corner of 4th Street and Court Avenue. You can see it's 2-story, about 30 feet tall, whereas the C3R district requires all buildings to be either 3 stories or 36 feet tall. That's another view. If you're familiar with the existing tavern on the main level, the windows here are already open. And they have an outdoor patio here along Court Avenue. This is the east side of the building where they would create 2 new openings in this area. This is just kind of a general character elevation. The subject property is right here. There's an existing large patio on the same block for the Mickey's business. And then I also show this picture because it kind of shows the relationship with the plaza condominiums. And as you know, sound travels up, and we've heard from these residents in the past that the existing patios already create a nuisance for the residents there. This is just another view down Court Avenue, subject property right here. The Hotel Randolph across the street to the west is designated on the National Register as a historic building, and it's also going to be renovated for new residential use. Just another picture of that intersection. This is looking more towards the west or towards the east. You can again see the plaza, residential, the Hotel Randolph, which is residential and will continue to be after the renovation.
Do you know what kind of residential is?
I don't know if it's going to be condominiums or apartments. Do you know, Eric?
I thought it was looked at as a historic tax credit for
apartments. The consent map. You see there's a pretty large stack of comment cards, both for and against. Again, I'll go through the staff recommendation in 2 parts, since there's the variance to expand legal nonconforming and then the conditional use permit. Regarding the variance to expand the legal nonconforming, we don't believe that the proposed renovations really meet the intent of the variance. We're concerned that the alterations aren't really compatible with the historic architectural character of the surrounding properties. Like I mentioned, the buildings directly to the west and to the east, and then also kind of southeast, are already on the National Register. This building itself is probably eligible to be designated on the register, but with the proposed renovations, it's probably unlikely that would ever happen. There's also been talk about designating either the Court Avenue or the 4th Street areas as local or as historic districts, but with the proposed renovations, we feel that might be detrimental to any future designations of those blocks. So we've recommended denial of the requested variance to expand a legal nonconforming. Then regarding the conditional use permit to allow expansion of the tavern use onto the 2nd floor, we've also recommended denial of that really for 2 major reasons. One of those is that the proposed design for open air really wouldn't have a way to contain the sound. We feel the noise would travel up, affect the nearby residential uses. Also across the street to the Dos Rios building, which has residential on the 3 or 4 floors above the restaurant. So we're really concerned about the noise. And then the other aspect is really the congestion that doubling the size of the existing patio or existing tavern could create. Right now, the site is at the corner of really the two main streets in the entertainment district. And so there's already a lot of congestion at this area at around closing times of the bar. So we feel that doubling the capacity is only going to increase the congestion there. We're not saying that there shouldn't be more taverns on Court Avenue or we shouldn't have any existing be expanded. We feel that, Court Avenue is a very important entertainment district for the city, and we recognize that. But we just feel, in this case, expanding this one at this location really doesn't meet the criteria necessary for granting a conditional use permit. So we've recommended denial.
Questions? Mel?
Bert, if somebody has a quote patio now at a tavern and they serve on that, they can't allow smoking in that area, is that correct?
If they serve food on it, correct.
Serve food? If they serve alcohol only? How does that work? Because there was a question about this would allow for smoking.
Chair Board, Sue Ann Donovan, zoning enforcement officer. It's my understanding, and we've dealt with this before, is that patios that don't serve food outside of a building, you can have smoking on the patio area.
Okay.
And we've had a number of people come in simply to get the patio, so there's a room place to smoke outside.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yes, if they aren't serving food, if we consider this a patio, which there's a question as to what it would be if it's sort of open air above.
Right. Okay.
That's a determination that we'd have to make.
I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Thanks, Bert. The applicant, representative of the applicant?
I'm Kathleen Law. I'm an attorney at Nye Master Good, which is located at 700 Walnut Street, Suite 1600 in Des Moines. And I represent the appellant in this matter, and also Dan Hunt, who is the architect, will speak after. I'm just going to speak for a couple minutes, and then Dan will come up and speak and show you the plans for the building. Appellant is seeking a conditional use permit for 319 Court Avenue for an expansion of his existing bar that's existing on the first floor of the building to expand it to the second floor for selling wine, liquor, beer, etc. And is seeking a variance if it's determined the variance is necessary to allow alteration of the legal nonconforming structure in the C3R district. As you're aware, there are several popular bars and patios already in the greater Des Moines area, primarily in the West Glen area, that are drawing customers from downtown to those popular rooftop areas. And we think this would be a great advantage to have an open air bar in the Court Avenue district. For the expansion area, applicant proposes creating openings in certain areas of the roof, as you saw in the drawings that Bert said. They'll just be cutouts in certain areas of the roof. And in the sidewalls of the second floor, primarily where the windows were before, removing just the window structures. But the exterior shell of the building and the character of the building will remain virtually in place, as you'll see when Mr. Hunt presents. In the staff report, the staff noticed a concern that the proposed open air design may create noise and vibration issues for residents in surrounding areas. We understand those concerns, which is why this design incorporates speakers in the tables in the open area bar upstairs to help eliminate some of the sound and vibration that would travel outside. Also, there won't be any live music anticipated in this, and appellant would agree to those conditions as well, and any other reasonable sound conditions or anything that would help alleviate the concerns from the neighbors. This proposed use is similar to that of numerous already existing bars, restaurants, and entertainment in the Court Avenue district, including to but not limited to those businesses that Bert was talking about on Court Avenue and on 4th Street. This proposed use is similar to that of already existing businesses and draws a similar clientele. In fact, many of the residents that live in this area are drawn to this area because of the entertainment value of the Court Avenue district. As I stated, appellant will agree to a prohibition on live music on the second floor and any other reasonable restrictions to help eliminate the noise concerns. And because the building is going to still be enclosed with just some holes in the roof of the building and the sidewalls, we don't believe that noise will be a factor anyway. With regard to staff's concerns about the congestion on the adjoining sidewalks at closing time, the appellant is willing to have a condition that the upper floor bar would close at a different time, perhaps a half hour earlier than the regular closing time, to help alleviate some of that congestion on the 4th and Court corner. By opening that bar out and letting it out a little bit earlier, that would help spread out the traffic over a period of time rather than all when the bars close at 2. With regard to the variance, the staff noted the building is currently a non-conforming structure because the buildings in C3R district are required to be at least 36 feet tall or 3 stories. We're aware that's the case, but there's also an exception for if there's an adjacent building that's less than 3 stories tall, then the building only has to be 2 stories. And there is an area northwest of this building that is lower than 3 stories tall that's adjacent to the northwest corner of the building. So we would argue that the current use is in conformance with the code and is not a legal non-conforming use at this time. But even if it is considered to be a legal non-conforming use, we don't believe a variance is really necessary because as you're aware, the code says that a legal non-conforming structure cannot be enlarged or altered in any way which increases its non-conformity. In this case, we're not increasing the nonconformity. The structure is 30 feet tall and 2 stories tall. By opening up these small areas in the ceiling of the building and the windows, we're not making the building any shorter, and we're not really altering the character of the building. So that does not make it an alteration that makes the building more nonconforming in this instance. Particularly removing the small skylight areas of the roof and the windows on the second floor will not make the building any shorter, as I suggested. In addition, the removal of the skylight areas won't even be visible from the street level because they're just being portions of the roof taken out. The appearance of the outside building and the structure will remain virtually unchanged, as you'll see when Mr. Hunt presents the drawings in a few minutes. And so we believe a variance is not necessary, but even if it is, that we meet the criteria for that because we're not altering the character. Staff also indicated in their report that the proposal does not fit within the character of the surrounding area and may impede the area becoming a National Historic District. Again, the appearance of the second floor is going to remain virtually unchanged in this instance. And as the board is aware, there are also many newer buildings and altered buildings along the Court Avenue area and the 4th Street area that have not maintained their historical character. For example, Dos Rios across the street, when the Standard replaced its windows on the second floor, and there are other buildings that have done similar alterations to this. Staff also noticed that the second floor could also be used for other uses in the C3R district if this isn't approved, such as offices and residences. Although that theoretically that's possible, it's probably not economically practical because of the glut of vacant space downtown and just the character of this district as an entertainment district to use that for those other purposes. Let's see. In closing, we just want to thank you for your consideration, and now I'll turn it over to Daniel Hunt. And the appellant is also here to address any questions as well.
Before you go, are there any questions? Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Dan Hunt. I'm with Connect Architecture, 1825 Industrial Circle, West Des Moines. When I was first asked to be a part of this project, this was the initial concept sketch that was presented during a pre-app meeting, and the owner took that to them to get initial feedback. Obviously, as when I saw it, I saw it raised a lot of concerns in regards to the historical character and the change of the overall building and what it would do. So the plan that you have in front of us today is in reaction to some changes as a result of this and feedback from the staff. Basically what we were doing on this initially is trying to keep as much of the infrastructure intact as possible, which included a lot of mechanical equipment in the center, trying to create an open air feeling through the space, but not really compromising or affecting the building by taking the entire upper level off. So as they mentioned, those darker areas, or actually lighter pochette areas, are just the portions of the roof that are going to be removed. The lines in between have to do with the structural integrity of the building, so we're actually tying the walls back to keep it all intact. The floor plan, as Bert showed, again, keeping everything in the center. This portion through here is all enclosed space, so this is actually just the open area, and then the bar itself would be underneath the enclosed portion. The concept sketch, again, one thing I wanted to point out is this was really about looking at what were the important aspects of the buildings from its a character standpoint, And what I saw is what was important were the pieces on top of the window, the header pieces on top of the window, and we tried to come up with an idea of how to come in with structural members and sandwich the wall and keep all that above it. So the beams that would be in place to open up these portions of the wall would be bolted into it. So at some time down the future, obviously those beams could be removed and take it back to its original window openings if another owner chose to. Also, I've kept the lower portions of the sills intact so that you get a sense of the building as you read it. You can see that there were windows there at one time. The owner's desire was to keep as much of the opening as possible, and that's basically an intent of the columns and the framework for the guardrail in between. We're keeping essentially everything else alone, the coins on the cornice line across the top, everything that would be from a historical standpoint what they call character defining elements of the construction. We're only removing pieces of the roof and portions in between the windows, which are simply walls. So in my opinion, if this was ever evaluated for National Park Service standards, you could reasonably make the case that the character defining elements are still there. I mean, one person can still be able to read that what was there and it can easily be put back. That was kind of the intent behind it. Again, you can get a better view of just those coin pieces on the top. They've been painted. There's no plan to repaint any of the walls whatsoever, so they would still be intact. So specifically in regards to some of the comments that the staff had concerns with, I just wanted to point out that one of them was to jeopardize the long-term integrity of the building. As I mentioned, anything that we're doing now can easily be replaced and put back in its original integrity. The existing building is currently being evaluated by a structural engineer. So we've looked at the floor system on the second floor all the way down to the foundations and the columns down below. We've got a plan on how to address the water issue, the structural issue all the way down the foundations. I would argue in the fact that we're actually improving the long-term structural integrity of the building by beefing up the columns, the floor, the supports, and doing more down in the basement. Modifications wouldn't be to the essential character of the surrounding area. Again, all character-defining features of the buildings have been restored, or I should say retained in this instance. We're not actually removing them. Detrimental effect of the impact of sound. Just if you can think about it for a minute, this space, it's not really an open air pavilion, it's still a room, and it would basically have 5.5 sides to it. So although we haven't done tests for sound, I can't stand here and say that there wouldn't be sound coming out, but it's my hunch and professional opinion that sound's going to be controlled somewhat, because you've got openings, you've got a roof, but you still have a contained room. So it's not similar to an open patio type of environment. And one other point about the capacity, the exiting of people out on the street. I don't know if this concern comes from specifically people coming out on the corner, on the lower level, but we will have 2 exits that are currently existing stairs, and there would be the option for having the people disperse when the second floor is closed out of either or both of those exits, so people aren't just actually leaving right at that corner. And lastly, I did go back this morning and think about the comments about the effect of the window pattern, the proportions, the openings, and there's some valid concerns there. And I put together another little quick alternate sketch that would show a concept that would keep the same size of openings, but we would introduce differing materials of metal, and these window openings would mimic the size of the old windows that were there. So we're in a sense trying to keep the same character of what was there in proportion of view, but it would be a semi-permeable surface that would open up, still be able to see through. So we would offer that as a possible solution to this concept, and happy to answer any questions.
Cindy.
Sir, just out of curiosity, if you just have these open areas in the ceiling, what about snow and rain, and is everything going to be plastic up there? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
The second floor will be treated just like a roof. So there would be a new membrane that would go into the second floor, and we'll have new roof drains and new pavers. It would be similar to the type of outdoor paving type of system where the water drains through the concrete and then down below it gets taken to a piping system and then out. So the only difference in this case is you've got walls around you and roof above you, and we would make sure that those are, can stand up to the weather and the elements. We have also discussed, we haven't figured out a concept exactly at this point. We've entertained the idea of a retractable type of roof, but at this point I can't really give you any specifics on that.
No.
Dan, I appreciate you showing us these two different concepts for like your profile or the facade there. But I do have a question on either or both of them. So what keeps people from flicking their cigarette butts out down to the street or the patio below, or throwing stuff or spitting on people, or, I'm sure the clientele wouldn't do that, but the wrong person might.
As an architect, I can't control stuff like that. I mean, what keeps people from doing that on sidewalks or on patios now?
Right.
So
Right.
there are some things that come to be that you've got to put faith and trust in the building owners.
Sure.
And
Sure.
it becomes more of an administrative thing on
Okay.
their part. So yes, the building edges are, the openings are up next to the building. There will be seating up next to it so you can see out.
Okay.
They meet the intent of IBC for safety railing and guardrails.
Now, on this facade that you show here, the completely grayed areas, that would be a metal panel or something there?
That's actually a...
Or is that the opening?
That's an opening, but
Okay.
it would be more like a wire cloth fabric, and you would still be able to see through it.
All right.
There might be 2-inch or 4.
Okay, but you're saying there is some kind of a barrier there?
Right, right.
Now, could you put the other facade up there instead, your earlier one?
Previous one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, on that one, it looks like you almost have like some railing and then some screening there, the first couple feet of the opening. Is that what I'm seeing there? Is that what you're representing?
Right, that one was just putting in column supports in between, which we need structurally, and just a simple rail across there.
Okay.
So the alternate one, we're trying to give some thought to some type of window pattern across there.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you. Anybody else here to speak in support? Anybody here to speak in opposition?
I have one question for Sue Ann.
Okay, any last questions for staff then? So Sue Ann?
Chair, members of the board, Sue Ann Donovan, Zoning Enforcement Officer for the City of Des Moines. We would argue that a variance is required to alter this building. What they're explaining is taking a roof system and window systems off and putting a whole new roof system underneath, which is a severe alteration of the character of that building, and would make it impossible for it to go back to a more conforming configuration, because they're essentially changing the whole character of that second floor. So I would argue that you have to go back to the variance standards again. Is there another use for this? Is there any other use for this building if they aren't granted a variance? Obviously, there is another use for this building. They have an existing bar in there. They're making a profit on that. Other areas in this entertainment district have put apartment building up above. You have Dos Rios across the street that has apartments. I know they did something above Spaghetti Works. There is a movement toward living in that area. So there is another use that's an option for the upstairs of this building. I don't see how you can get away from them needing a variance. They're changing the character of the building. They're creating another roof structure. They're opening up the second structure. They're altering the windows. It's clear to me that this requires a variance. If you don't grant the variance, the conditional use permit isn't even something to be discussed under this design.
Okay.
Mel? Oh, Linda, I'm sorry.
My question is, will they be able to smoke up there if it's a patio?
I don't know what we're going to call it. It depends on the design. I mean, is it open enough to be a patio, or is it, I suppose it's, I don't know.
I would suspect that that's,
I would suspect that that would be the next hurdle that we'd have to get over.
it
Yes.
would be,
It would be,
it'd be open, so we
it'd be
can
open, so
smoke
it's a
there.
patio. Yeah. I think there's some definitions in the state law about how much enclosure needs to be
Mm.
open, but I'm not up to speed on that, so I'm not going to go too far into that.
Sue, it's mentioned in the staff report that about 15 years ago, the city council adopted this Court Avenue Neighborhood Urban Design Plan. Is that kind of just a guide, suggestions? Do redevelopment projects on Court Avenue have to get approved by a subcommittee or something?
It does go through the design review for new construction and construction in Court Avenue and alterations. So we take it seriously, and this would be changing the face of that building. You may be able to read it, that those used to be windows, but they aren't the
Okay.
original window cuts anymore. They're gone.
So even if we wanted to kind of approve this, we don't have the authority to determine, the urban design plan guideline.
The plan is really more of it's not a legally binding plan.
Right,
The
but
only
it's a
time
guide. It's a guide.
Becomes binding though is if they would enter into a contract with the city of Des Moines, if it'd be like city funding and whatnot, then we would hold them to.
Or need to
Court
lease
Avenue.
space, like lease the sidewalk or something like that, maybe, I don't know.
if we'd go that far, but
Okay.
if it's like a redevelopment project that requires city assistance, then we apply the
Okay,
principles
I've
in that.
got you.
In this
All right.
case, they're not asking for any city
Gotcha,
assistance.
okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks. Close the public portion, go to board decision then.
Are they going to get their 3-minute rebuttal?
Well, it was, we did kind of throw the shoe out there doing that before. Yes, you can. Sure, if city staff comes in and says something, then we'll let the applicant come back and say one more thing. It's a different, it's not, we kind of got in trouble on it. Obviously, you've picked up on our rules and procedures, I see.
My name is Larry Smithson. I reside at 5095 Copper Creek Drive in Pleasant Hill, Iowa. I know we have some serious issues that the city has with things downtown, noise, congestion, historical, being a good neighbor, and I think I really have some good answers for that. I'm going to address noise first. I don't think there's a possibility or a hope that we could make or contribute to the noise that's already downtown. We've got Mickey's, and I'm not knocking a competitor, but they're over on 3rd and Court. They have a complete flow blown. We're not talking the 65 decibel sound permit. I think it's called the E permit that we have heard discussed earlier today. They have bands playing outside several nights a week. They've even asked for several times because I don't want to be a bad neighbor, and I've sent in, okay, it's a special weekend, let them do it. I think they've even been in front of this council or the variance committee to get some sound permits for different nights, different weekends, different events. That's been pretty noisy. In dealing with the sound, we're cutting or Pines is cutting a few holes in the building, and I keep hearing everybody reference that sound rises. Sound clearly does not rise. Sound falls. And if you have ever been to a performance, the reason they hang all the speakers way up in the air, almost against the ceiling, is because sound falls. Okay? So I think that's very important. Pines has acknowledged that they're not going to put no bands up there. They equally are looking for what the other people were looking for. They just want some background music up there with the patrons, so they're up there hanging, that there's a little feeling of some party, something going on. That is covering the sound. The historic area, I have brought some pictures that I'd like to just pass around. We have some of Dos Rios across the street. I'm just going to give you the whole package. Okay. This is Dos Rios across the street. And this one clearly shows the second floor. A lot of reference about second floor. I don't know. I don't claim to be a builder or an architect, but all I see is square windows and brick. I don't see anything making it historic, like let's reference the spaghetti work of the courthouse or what I consider a historic look. This is another one of Dos Rios from the side. You can clearly tell it's the new petition, new style windows, no even open type windows, and it's all metal. We've got your own parking garage, the city parking garage, okay? On the corner of 3rd and Court, okay? I don't see where the city even tried to follow any guidelines here of creating anything to do with following a historic look. A couple of these are repetitious, I'm gonna pull. We've got one here of Sabracos. You know, good people. You know, just families working, trying to make a living. But there's nothing historic. This building has been painted green. They put a new business called Shorty's in the basement. They wasn't forced to meet any historical. From here I'm gonna pass. Here is one, the remodel was done a couple of years ago. This was done as Pelican. It's now called Standard. And you can tell it's just brick. I mean, I don't see no architectural design that makes anything look historical, and new style windows. I'm going to reference our own theater. I don't think we can see anything there that looks too historic. It was built to make the downtown Court Avenue area do well.
Larry, I don't want to cut you short. I know you're doing a job, but
No, that's
it's about
like
3 minutes,
a couple
so.
more, and then we'll get to the other point. Here's a new one that was called Mickey's. It does show the sound, the stage, and the front. We'll let them go so you can see them. I think that kind of explains that the historical value downtown, while important, has been kind of a come see, come see, whether people are building to look that way or not look that way. Number 3, another one that was raised that was very, very important, is congestion. I think you would find out clearly that the congestion on Court Avenue, I was here 6, 7, 8 months ago, and the city was clearly representing, when we was talking patios, that the congestion is on the corner of 3rd and Court Avenue. We've got a complete event center there that hosts legends, heroes, beer can alley, a venue, and a couple others in this building. You have Johnny's on the same corner and Mickey's, which is one of the most popular downtown. Major congestion on 3rd and Court. You get over to 4th and Court, we have Dos Rios that's usually closed by midnight on a weekend night earlier during the week. You got a bail bonds company, you got a few pubs, and you got a big parking lot and pints. There is no congestion or troubles to speak of on 4th and Court Avenue. It's just not the congested problem area. So I would just like, I think that answers 3 of the important points you're looking at, which is noise, congestion, and the historical look of the downtown. I thank you for your time.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Staff said no. You're only allowed 3 minutes on a rebuttal. Sorry. Now, any last questions for staff? Okay, we'll close the public portion, go to board decision then.
Well, Mr. Chairman, as vice chair, I want to throw out a comment here. I think a variance is necessary. I think the question before us is, can the variance be granted? Do they meet the conditions of granting the variance, or are there character conditions, nuisance issues, et cetera, that would prevent us in good faith from approving that variance? So I really feel the variance is necessary. The alterations to the building, the way the zoning ordinance works, 2 floors, a variance is needed.
I would echo what Sue Ann said, as well as Mel. This isn't a historic standard, but I believe the variance is required because the modifications being made to the building will completely negate its ability to be National Register ever. It's completely character changing. So this isn't a historic review, but it triggers, in my opinion, that a variance is required because of the substantive modification.
Other thoughts?
I didn't hear the last part of it.
I think it's so substantive that it's negating its ability to be on the register. So to me, that is meeting a test of substantial changes, so therefore triggering a variance requirement.
And I might just...
So I'm not getting any arguments on that, so.
Yeah.
Now, the question here is, what do we do about a variance?
Well, I guess we'd have to look at, is there another reasonable use for this building the way it is? Will that change alter the essential character of the area around there? That's one of the key provisions of this. Now, there may have been changes to other buildings. There may have been buildings that fell down or burned down, and so somebody built a new building. Those situations may not have been before this board, where we didn't have authority to make those determinations of if they do fit the essential character or not. But in this case, we do have the authority to see if it fits the essential character or if it would alter that essential character. And I certainly believe it would in this case. We've got a historic-looking building now, the oldest part of downtown. In fact, I think the oldest remaining building in downtown Des Moines sits just to the north of there, just past Elliott, I believe. Or it could be the building right north of it.
Physically connected.
Yeah, it's physically connected. That is, I believe, the oldest brick building still standing. This is the core of the historic Court Avenue district, period. If we wind up with facades that are just blank behind them, and even as a drive-by, you'd be able to tell that, once we've given that away, we can't get that back. You can't just put it back together. I think there was a reference about that.
There was, yeah.
You just can't put that back together. 15 years ago, this city did adopt this Court Avenue Neighborhood Urban Design Plan. It is a guide, and it has more teeth if you want something from the city, but it is a guide. When we look at the University Avenue Streetscaping Plan or the Gateway West Plan, those are things we have to keep in mind as representatives of this city. So if we want to make changes to that, we've got to be very cognizant of that. So I really feel it's going to alter that character. I don't want to sit and argue sound to the nth degree. I will say I was at Bon Jovi. The reason the speakers hang above you is so you have more room for people below, and so you can see what's going on. But regardless of the sound issue, I just feel like we're altering the essential character. We won't be able to get that back. That does affect the locality of that area, and I think it would be a negative effect on that neighborhood.
Okay. Everybody is so quiet on this.
I don't see how we can grant a variance when the building can clearly be used as it is right now. I mean, we're changing, it's such a huge change. And I don't think it meets the criteria.
You know, I like the plans. Boy, they're good. I think Mel and I would probably be the first ones right through the door. But yeah, we are hung with the overhang of a variance. And it's pretty clear. You know, if we didn't have that variance there, I don't think there'd be much of an issue. But it has to, in a variance parameter, you have to show that you're getting zero use out of the building. And that doesn't happen. So I wish I had something better to say. I wish, because the plans are great, but we're stuck with it being a variance.
And, you know, if Larry and the gang wanted to expand the tavern into the upstairs area, I might be, hey, fine. Let's remodel the upstairs and have a good time. But to tear it off and to tear the facade, basically gut it, just have a skeleton there,
It's a variance.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, I agree with Mel that if the owner wanted to expand upstairs, I'm not sure if that's possible, to expand their tavern area upstairs and have windows that open so you can let some fresh air in when it's there. But, in the climate that we're in, it just doesn't seem reasonable to tear holes in the roof and use it that way.
Mr. Chair, and you may want to bifurcate your consideration of the items. And
really? What does that mean?
Which means, I'm hearing some support for the expansion of the use into the second level, okay? Which would still require a conditional use.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying it as a passing comment, not as an alternative scheme.
But I've heard it from multiple members, and so I wanted to suggest that you might take them up separately based on their own criteria.
It may not go, but I think it's not a bad idea to.
And if you need more information to consider them separately, you can ask for that too, I would think.
What if we just want to move staff recommendations?
Well, what he's saying is split it up. I wasn't trying to put an alternative plan on the table. I was just in good faith. Yeah.
Just for illustration.
Okay.
You deny the variance.
Right.
But grant or want to consider the conditional use. I think it would be fair for the appellant to have another go at it, because that totally changes the model of how they would do that. The conditional use, how they operate or use that second floor may change
Okay.
And you would want to consider that, so.
But if we're just denying what was presented here today, that doesn't negate them coming
They
back.
could come back with a separate request too,
Right.
yes.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, if there's some desire on the part of the board to, that you're supportive of the conditional use, you may want to
I don't know
bifurcate
that
the
I'm
vote.
that far down the pipe
Okay.
with it. I'd need to know a lot
I'm not
more,
sure I could
so.
even make a determination on a
Yeah.
conditional use. I mean,
Right, but-
you have to have exits and.
That's why
you know,
I'm
I mean, all
saying,
those
if you
things
did that, you
just
may
don't
also
even-
table that consideration of the
Conditional
conditional
use
use itself, so that they have
Time
ample
to think.
consideration, right? We're not supporting either one, based on our.
I really
staff
wasn't trying to open up another can of worms.
No,
Apologize.
I know, I just.
But I
I'm looking
appreciate
at-
your
yeah.
good advice.
I have a question for Eric, actually.
Eric?
If you did that, do you have to renotice? Because
I think we would
most of the comment
renotice it
calls.
if you chose to do that, just for the sake of it, would be a somewhat different request.
It's an entertainment
Yeah.
district. It seems reasonable to me to have a bar on the second floor of this building, but most of the complaints were relative to noise. And while I agree with the applicant that sound falls, it's still loud down there, and opening holes in the roof is going to allow a lot of sound. But if you're talking about a tavern on the second floor of a building that's had them there before, that seems reasonable to me.
And I'm not, our argument is that neither one would be something staff can support. But I just wanted to point out, based on what I'm hearing,
But I guess my question was, you'd have to renotice for us to actually
I
do
think it
that.
would probably make sense to do that.
And if you renoticed, it'd be a whole new thing. They'd have to file a new fee and come back.
Well, they can always do that with a different consideration
Proposal
anyway.
anyway. Okay, I'd maybe rather just let them make that decision on their own.
I'm just saying it might be, if you're considering the conditional use on its own.
I'm not.
They may not have the preparation today to make that happen.
Okay, I'm just considering what was put here on paper today, so.
Well, then, when I listen to the motion, if it's worded correctly, we can go ahead and vote on both at the same time. Right, Mel?
I'm not sure, we've had discussion. Do we have a motion?
Not yet.
Okay.
We got two other items to go through.
Yes, yeah, I'm not trying to draw this out. If we deny a conditional use permit, they'd have to wait a certain length of time to come back.
Unless it's presented in a substantially different manner.
Okay. Then I'm going to make a motion to deny the conditional use permit requested based on staff recommendations. That sound okay?
I'm good.
Okay.
So here's, yeah, what about,
I would address
Oh,
the variance
yeah.
position too.
yeah.
Was this a two-parter to begin with?
Yeah,
Oh,
well,
I'm,
there's a conditional use and a variance.
all right.
And the variance was.
Okay, my apologies. I want to make and I hate to be this way, but I want to make a motion to deny the variance to allow alteration of the legal non-conforming structure and deny the conditional use permit.
So accept staff recommendation.
Yes, so I'll be moving staff recommendations, yes. Thank you, Mike.
Its staff recommendation is to deny the conditional use permit and deny the variance for the legal non-conforming expansion.
Okay. And that's what Mel.
Right,
So you're
And the bar,
denying both. You're
Right.
separating.
not going to separate.
no. And the bar can continue to operate as it is in the bottom,
Right.
in the main level.
Sure, you had a,
No,
no, thought you had a comment.
no.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Been moved and second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries 6-1. Hope you come back, guys. I like the plan. Item 13, special permit and variance at 3200 Delaware.
Item number 13 is a special permit for a farmer's market located in the Collectomania parking lot. This probably would have been consent worthy, except they want a variance of the limitation that limits a special permit to 5 years. They want to get this approved in perpetuity, so they're not having to come back to this board in 5 years for a renewal. So the subject property is located on the west side of Delaware Avenue, just south of East Euclid Avenue, north of Hull Avenue. The site contains the Collectomania business and then some outdoor volleyball courts. And the farmers market has been taking place in this parking lot to the north of the Collectomania. They also have some signage on the existing freestanding pole sign for Collectomania. Here's the sign I just mentioned, East Side Farmers Market, from June to October, Tuesdays 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. This is a photo of the parking lot from Delaware Avenue. You can see the edge of the Collectomania building. You can see the ADM plant to the west on the other side of the railroad tracks, and then to the north is the volleyball courts. Just another site photo. We did not get any comment cards back. As I said, this overall is definitely an asset to this neighborhood and to the city as a whole, so we're very supportive of the special permit for the farmers market. However, we do feel with all farmers markets that just the occasional review every 5 years is appropriate, just to be sure that they're not bothering anyone or creating a hassle. So that's our recommendation: approval of the farmers market, denial of the variance, and I'll display
For the 5-year.
conditions up here. Any questions?
Bert, do you consider a farmer's market to primarily be you're selling produce or food goods or home-baked foodstuffs?
Yeah, and I think it could include crafts too, but I think really
Okay.
the food-based farmer's market has to be like the I guess
essence?
the main part, yeah.
Okay, if
Yes.
somebody was selling used items, flea market stuff, have a junk jamboree, does that fit in under farmers markets?
Not if it was solely just like a flea market that popped up once a week, but if it's truly like a seasonal food-based farmer's market at the core, then it's a farmer's market.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks, Bert. Applicant or representative of the applicant?
I'm Robert Mapes, 1448 Thompson, Des Moines. This market has been there for about 10 years. Didn't know we had to have a permit. There was a question because it was an M1 zoning that we didn't need a variance. And supposedly we had submitted something that you guys were supposed to vote on before you voted on the variance. I don't know whether you got it or not, or I don't know what your procedures are, so. She advertised it on TV and Phil saw it and said you can't do that, and so he sent her a letter. And so now I'm here. So, I don't know. Oh, farmers markets have to be licensed with the Iowa Department of Agriculture. We are licensed. We have vendors, people that take the checks from the Old People's Nutrition Program. I don't know what their proper term is. They get them through the senior centers. If you take those as a vendor, then you have to go through classes with the Department of Agriculture and be certified. And we have those people. So, questions?
Yep, your only objection is 5-year limit, right?
Well, we didn't even know we had to have a permit. And apparently we've operated, I'm the manager for this year. And apparently nobody's ever gotten a permit in the past. And there's never been any complaints. So.
I understand, but everybody else, Drake, downtown, Beaverdale, all the ones around have been getting permits, so.
Well,
it's not
yeah,
uncommon.
and we went to the city manager's office and they wouldn't give us permit because we didn't want to close this, because we weren't using a street. And I said, hell, we'll close Delaware. We'll do that. We'd be happy to. And for some reason, they didn't want to do that.
No. Truck drivers wouldn't be. That might be.
I don't know.
Robert, about how many vendors are you going to have here?
I don't know.
Well, you've already had it, didn't you?
Yeah.
Well, how many did you have?
This last week, or this week, yesterday, we had what, 5?
Okay.
But see, the problem is produce isn't ready yet.
Okay.
Unless you're buying it from Missouri or someplace.
I got you.
And the checks aren't viable until the 1st of June.
Okay.
And so we don't have the people coming looking for produce until June. And this month, we were operating on a no rent situation.
Sure. Let them try it out.
Well, people come and set up, and if they like it, they stay, and if when the checks start to become usable, then we will get crowds and we will get more vendors.
Okay. The city staff is recommending just a once a week and a 3-hour period. So you're just interested in a 3-hour setup and that's it?
Well, that's all the farmer's market is. I tried to make her a skirt, and I asked for, in the variance, that she could have a car show sometime, or a motorcycle rally, or have a carnival set up out there or something, you know, as she chose. I mean, she got a huge parking lot. And I noticed that in the paperwork, it did list some of those things down on the bottom, but yeah, right now, we're just interested in the farmer's market.
Okay. Well, the staff has 5 things you'd have to comply with if they approve it. You've read those 5 things?
I've read them.
Do you agree with them?
Well, the only one I have questions about is signage, and I'm going to have to find out who I have to talk to.
Okay.
To find out because it doesn't say what the requirements are. It just says I've got to talk to somebody.
Sure. Okay. So it sounds like the main issue here is just, you'd like to have this in perpetuity. The city staff is recommending a 5-year period.
Well, that's all you'll grant, as I've been told.
Well.
Pretty much is.
Okay.
That's what I was told, that if we get it, we got to pay for it and we get it for 5 years, so we have no choice.
There's some we've only allowed for 1 year.
Well, you have that right, you have that prerogative.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay.
Is there anybody else here to speak in support? Anybody here to speak in opposition? Any last questions for staff? Hearing none, we'll close the public portion and go to board decision.
I would move staff recommendations.
Second. Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Boom. And last but not least, variance in the vicinity of 2822 6th Avenue.
As the staff report indicates, there's actually 3 parcels that are maybe hard to see on this aerial in the hatched area. There's a small piece of property here on the corner that's actually not part of the site, but it's essentially the east half of the block. The heating and cooling contractor operation is basically on this diagonal piece here, and then the other piece currently. This is a car wash right here that would be demolished for this proposed project. The project would involve a building off the south part of the existing building into that other property. What that does is this property here is a legal type use for this zoning, but it's the use of land for the parking doesn't conform to the current standards of the ordinance. And then the way the ordinance is written, we don't allow expansion of those uses that don't conform in all of the aspects that they need to for use of the land. And that provision's in the applicables. So what that triggers is basically conformance for the setbacks on all the site. And then right now there's but head-in parking from 6th into the property that maneuvers directly onto 6th Avenue. They are seeking to retain that. However, since that's a non-conforming aspect, in order to expand, they also need the relief to continue that as a non-conforming parking arrangement. They did submit the sketch thing and layout here. Nothing. Try to see if I can get it to go north-south here for you. If I can get zoom out then. And right now, kind of these lighter shaded areas are the areas they're proposing for open space and landscaping. This is existing, I believe, to some extent anyway. The plantings may not be there. So there's kind of an open space here. And then they're also proposing a narrow strip of open space there. That would be a modification to how the site is currently. However, in all other areas, they would basically have a zero setback paving condition where it meets the street property line. Up in here, you can see these spaces that would head in from the street through the right-of-way. I also put the provision from the traffic code in there because if those spaces were completely on the edge of the right-of-way and within the right-of-way, there are some standards that would also have to be met, depending on how they end up arranging that. But our city traffic engineer did look at this proposal and is not comfortable with continuing the direct perpendicular parking, but would be would be able to support an arrangement which would have 45-degree angle parking along here in those locations in order to preserve some of the parking that would be lost by meeting the standards completely, which I think is important, and I've had a discussion with the appellant, and that's certainly important. And they would, in this arrangement, they would still lose some of these spaces as they're shown. So I think from that standpoint, staff was empathetic to that situation to try to retain as much off-street parking for customers. This other area is generally used for their fleet parking and their employee parking, you know, when they take vans and so forth. And then this area would, I think, be dedicated primarily to maneuvering for truck access, and this is more of a storage facility is my understanding. I'll let the appellant get more descriptive to give you the detail of that operation. But, when we looked at this, we believed that there was some opportunity to get some of the perimeter, the 5-foot setback achieved. That wasn't presented to us. We weren't really seeing the basis for which they weren't providing it. I've had some discussion again with the appellant, and I think there's some argument. We just didn't have that at the time of the application to be able to respond to. If we certainly, if they weren't providing it, I would expect in order to find support for a variance that there would be some alternative proposal where they would sort of offset that. I would expect that to be met in another way than to achieve what the intent and spirit of the ordinance is, which is to have some amount of green space for the site when we do improvements and expand and extend these uses over time. I'll show you the photos of the area to give you a sense of what we're looking at. This is starting at the southwest corner, looking north. I can get, I'd have to view these individually depending on that. That's the back side of the car wash, and then you can also see the south side of the building where the addition would come from as proposed. This is the southeast corner at New York Avenue and 6th Avenue. You can see the zero paved condition there. Looking more west at that same area from 6th, across 6th. That must be a duplicate. more to the northwest, so you can see the area between the buildings currently. There's some parking going on there. I think with the building addition, that would be lost to some level. Then moving north along the northeast corner where this is at Corning and 6th Avenue. Again, that's that little triangular piece that's not actually part of the site.
Whose land is that?
I think the city owns it. There's some potential to lease it for the Kiwanis Nature Island sign. I don't know if that's where that's at right now. I couldn't speak to that. That's been a concept that's at least been thrown up there. But you can see they use that right now as a fenced, secure area for their vehicle parking and some loading area. And then, in fact, there's, I think, some loading occurring as I took the photo. This is the consent map, and then I have cards here. I think, you know, the businesses, all the existing developed businesses down there have challenges with their meeting standards due to it's a fairly compact industrial area. So, I mean, I think staff understands there are some challenges, but we didn't see the alternatives or evaluation of alternatives to be able to say that we couldn't achieve this minimum standard to some level. So right now we're recommending denial of the setback variance. I think if we saw another possible layout or something, we could potentially support an exception or some version of a variance that would meet the standard in certain locations, but at this time we didn't have that to respond to. We do recommend approval of the variance to allow the off-street parking to maneuver in the right-of-way, but we want to limit that to the recommendations that were provided by the city traffic engineer, which we want to ensure that we're complying with all the traffic codes that are outside of the zoning ordinance. Elimination of the perpendicular spaces to either a 45-degree angle or parallel parking arrangement, such that basically the maneuvering occurs off the traveled way is what the intent of that, being able to do that. And we think that that can be achieved given the dimensions that are there. No parking would extend to areas along 6th Avenue where maneuvering of the right-of-way does not currently exist. So we're not saying we would support continuing that angled parking scenario down into this area that didn't already have it. We want it limited to that area where the perpendicular parking was occurring. And then approval of such parking as part of a site plan and construction contract by the Permit and Development Center, city engineer and traffic engineer to ensure proper curving, paving, marking, and public sidewalk design are accommodated. So all those things have to go on in there. Any questions?
Yeah, Eric, on the setback, are you talking only on the south? You're against the...
It'll be all the perimeter. I mean, it's required on all areas that wouldn't be drive access points.
Okay,
What
so...
the requirement is.
So you're saying the entire perimeter, correct?
Right now, that's what they're proposing, is basically leaving it as is. There was some little, you know, there's this small area here where it's already being met.
The applicant wants to leave it as is.
Well, generally, they're proposing some improvement, you know, a little sliver up in this area and some removal of paving up in that northwest corner. So there's some modification, but the 5-foot setback they're wanting to leave as is.
And the staff wants your recommendation is to keep the 5-foot setback on the entire perimeter.
Right.
Am I saying that correctly?
Except where there would be drive access points and where they would still do that parking, but it would be at a 45-degree angle arrangement versus the perpendicular.
Okay, so on the south piece of property where the car wash is, they would have to...
They would essentially have it entirely, yeah.
Based
on our recommendation.
Okay, entirely meaning the
5-foot setback.
On the two sides, on New York Avenue and 6th Avenue.
Right. I think there would, based on what they were showing, there's going back to the building, they do have I think we would expect a, a reasonable access drive to come out of here somewhere, because this is they'd have to back in.
No, I understand the access. I
So
just want to
other
make,
than where the access drives would be, yes.
okay.
Now, Jake?
Eric, is the trigger of the whole site because the buildings are connected?
Well, yes, they could, if they did this as a kind of a detached building, and this was as a separate property, they would have to comply within this property, but that wouldn't have really gotten into the existing non-conforming conditions of that north building, so.
Okay.
They could have done them essentially as two separate sites, or treated them like two separate sites.
Any other questions for staff? Thanks, Eric. Applicant or representative of the applicant?
If you could leave this plan, maybe.
Okay.
That would be good. Thanks, Eric. Hello, I'm Chuck Gassman. 4440 41st Street in Des Moines is my home address. I'm represented here with Clay Schneckloth from Snyder and Associates and Grant Bell, former owner of Bell Brothers Heating and Air Conditioning. First of all, I want to thank the board for your time and effort. I sit on several of these types of boards. In Des Moines, I sit on the Building and Fire Code Appeal Board, so I hear appeals, so I know where you're coming from and how difficult it can be and how time-consuming it is. So I do thank you for that. I also want to thank the city for getting us on the agenda in a quick fashion here when this all came up. We were kind of taken off guard by it, and the city has done a wonderful job helping me at least understand all of this, because this isn't what I do for a living. And we've had several heated conversations, but it's gotten us to this point, so thank you. First of all, I want to just take a little preamble and tell you about our business. We've been in business since 1955. We've been in this current location since 1965. So we've been a good corporate citizen on 6th Avenue for 48 years. In 1995, I came to Bell Brothers as part owner, and Grant Bell and I ran the business together. And then in January of 2011, I bought Grant's portion of the business, so I'm currently the sole owner of the company. In 2013, May of 2013, I purchased the Bell Brothers building and the car wash from Bell Real Estate. And that's why it says on your thing that it's Bell Real Estate, but it's really Gassman Real Estate LLC that owns that property today. As we move forward and what the intent of this project is I bought Bell Brothers with the intention to grow and to expand our business and expand employment in the city of Des Moines, and we have some very specific plans for that. But in order to move those plans forward, we have to have an infrastructure that will work, that we can expand our business. In the spirit of that, I set out to look for properties that would work for our business, and landed on a building up in Ankeny, the old Adams Door building, and was in negotiations with the people that own that building to move there because the structure that we had just wouldn't work. And I visited with Grant about my intention to do that, and he said, well, wait a minute, why don't you think about this building? And we talked about the building behind, and Grant's ready to retire from the car wash, and so we struck a deal to buy the car wash. But before we struck that deal, we had a pre-app meeting with the city, and some of the things that, before I invested a ton of money in this, was, is this a doable deal? Can this really work? And the answer came back is that the existing building we had would be grandfathered because it's existing, which meant that our on-street parking would stay as is. And that the new building, there was some setback requirements, but that administratively a lot of those things could be taken care of, and that yes, definitely this is a project that we'd like to have stay in Des Moines and we can make this thing work. So on that premise, I moved forward, and the city was clear that I may have to come to this board for a variance for some of the setbacks. So, but on that premise, I moved forward, and in preparation for the addition, I spent a ton of money remodeling the interior of our building to accommodate the addition and the workflow through our building, and added about 3,000 square feet of offices, and shrunk our sheet metal shop, because the sheet metal shop will move out into the new addition, and that'll become a sheet metal fabrication shop and warehouse. And so I have about $200,000 invested in a property that I need to make work. if the variance doesn't happen, then, you know, I have some major decisions to make as to my investment there. But the biggest thing that we have is maneuverability around the site, and I'm not sure how this thing works, but in here, we have to be able to get our trucks in and out and maneuver. And one of the things that the city is really concerned about is the setback along this area here. And in order to be able to get our trucks out of this area, they'll drive right through that setback area to turn and keep them off of 6th Avenue. A couple of the other problems that we have is currently our entrance to our facility to load and unload trucks is up here. And semis come down 6th Avenue and they park in 6th Avenue, and we have to take a forklift out on 6th Avenue to unload semis. Either that or they drive across 6th Avenue and then back into our gate. Either one is not desirable on anybody's part. The other thing that's an issue is the car wash that sits down here. The car wash, Grant wants to retire from that, but there's been lots of incidences with the police and especially nightlife and that kind of thing that is undesirable over there, that we eliminate that as well. So we're going to get the semi-traffic off of 6th Avenue, and we're going to eliminate a car wash and somewhat of a nuisance issue, especially in the evening. And I might note, it has nothing to do with this, but several of the businesses in this area have been broke into in the last month, and not just little break-ins where they're breaking doors down and everything else to get in. So I think getting that car wash out of there will help with that, because that's kind of a hideout for people. So the need for our variance is maneuverability. On 6th Avenue, our head-in parking, that is customer parking and vendor parking, and it's also the only place we have that's viable for handicap parking. And with the addition, we are required to have 2 handicap spots. And this plan, we have some other plans that we'll be showing that have, that show the 2 handicap spots there. If we have diagonal parking, and we have a diagram that shows the diagonal parking, customers coming down 6th Avenue can pull in and park. Somebody coming from the south to the north have to make a big loop to turn to get in, or go around the block to try and figure out how to get into our customer and vendor parking. So the diagonal parking doesn't really work very well there, but we really do need those parking spaces. I'll also add that we've been there for 48 years and we've never had an accident of somebody backing out. When the 45-degree angle thing came up, I actually backed my truck out, and because of the way the building is to the north of us, where do I put this to?
Set it right there and I'll zoom in on it.
This is the building to the north of that head-in parking, and because he comes out so far out to the street, you can't see cars coming down 6th Avenue in a 45-degree angle, where you can if you're a head-in parking. So the diagonal parking, in my opinion, doesn't work very well there. This is also the corner that we were talking about, that is the Riverview Nature Center corner, and that the Kiwanis had some title to that. Well, the reality is that the Kiwanis has given up all their rights to the Riverview Nature Park and that corner, and that this is where the Jim Dandy used to sit, and the city did a fine job of getting that taken down and condemned. But Kiwanis is going to put a sign there. And now the Kiwanis doesn't have anything to do with that. The Parks Board has taken that over, and it's back to the city. And so I met with the Oak Park Neighborhood Association and talked to them and showed them our plans and what we were trying to do here. And they looked at it and said, well, I can't believe that they're asking you to do what they're asking you to do, but we have this corner, we'd like to put a sign there for the Oak Park Neighborhood Association, and if you're willing to help us with that, that would be a major plus for the community and for us. So here's a letter that they have put together, and basically it says that if we can, our variance is granted, Bell Brothers will take over maintaining that corner. We'll landscape that corner in conjunction with them, and that we will allow them to put a sign there, and they'll maintain the sign. We'll mow the grass and take care of the landscaping there. So it takes it off of the city's responsibility to do that. It dresses up that corner, and the Oak Park Neighborhood Association was very, very much impressed with what we're planning to do here and thought it would be a really good addition to the neighborhood there. In addition to that, I have numerous letters from neighbors. This is PDM, which is directly south of us, Universal, who's across the street, Universal Printing, Des Moines Cold Storage, Kevin Bauer over at Manco Window Systems, Dave Guy, Iowa Roofing, and Gino Foggia over at Gino's Restaurant.
About 1 minute to wrap it up.
Okay. We have the plans that we'd like to show, so I'll bring Clay up.
Okay.
Thank you for your time. My name is Clay Schneckloth with Snyder Associates, helping represent Bell Brothers with their addition. If we can, got a rendered image here that hopefully helps describe a little bit what we're proposing to do. To show a little bit of that truck traffic that Chuck was describing before, is the semi will now back to the south side of the building here and eliminates the traffic along 6th Avenue of the semi aspect where he was describing where it would park here, try and back into off of 6th Avenue. Stop touching it there. The other item that we were talking about is we have a garage door on the south side of our building and a garage door on the southeast corner of our building. Normal everyday operations would include loading and functioning within our property, and loading a truck from our fabrication and warehouse area and being able to maneuver through our site around to the other side or even out to 6th Avenue. There's a concern with if there was landscaping or setback within this front property line, that the truck would maneuver on top of our proposed, the apparent proposed plant material area. So we wanted to show a little bit of the truck movement through that site, and then also we wanted to talk a little bit on the parking that's along 6th Avenue that's adjacent to our right-of-way. We did show on the second exhibit how 45-degree parking would work along 6th Avenue. I think on the original one there was 8 stalls, and now this one there's 5 stalls. We would lose 3 parking stalls. We do require 2 handicap stalls, and this is our customer parking for our main entrance into our site here. All of the area in here is within the fenced-in area, not conducive for customer parking. We want people to come right to our front door area here. So that has to happen, would like to happen and remain right along 6th Avenue.
I would also point out that from the original plan that Eric had, if you look at the corner of our building where this landscaping is, everything to the south of that is new green space that's being added. We also show green space on New York and also on the corner down by the bus stop on the southeast corner of trying to get some green space in there. So where we can put green space in, we're making an effort to do that. Can you see those traffic lines on the screen there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. You got one?
Yeah. So I think you can see that our addition and what we're trying to do is a major improvement to the area.
Okay.
Question, Mel.
Mr. Gassman, and also Clay, nice presentation. With what you're proposing here, and you do show this green space, and while it's not the amount of green space, on the 5-foot setback being, which you'd normally have to comply with the green space you are proposing, besides having grass in it, are you proposing some ornamental trees or shrubs that would go in those islands or areas as well?
I can answer that, and Clay may follow up. The corner on the southeast corner by the bus stop, we hesitate to put plantings there because of people trampling them, and the North High School kids walking up and down the street there will just destroy them.
Wow.
And then on the south corner there.
Yep.
On the southwest corner of New York Avenue, the same thing will happen there because of the truck traffic and things that are.
Those CDL drivers.
That's right.
Right,
That's it.
okay.
But in this area here, yes, there'll be trees, and you can see landscaping up along the building there to dress it up, and then we'll put some trees in there as well.
And it looked like on a previous proposal that you had showed what I would call on the northwest, kind of the backside there was some trees shown.
Yes, what we.
Back up in there, yeah.
On this upper corner up here where the Sixth and Corning is.
Right.
That we would screen that whole fence.
Mm-hmm.
So that with evergreen trees.
Okay.
I'm not sure I can find that real quick.
That's okay.
I'm running out of time, but we would screen that fence with evergreen.
Sure.
Trees so that as you're coming down the street from the north to the south, that
Okay.
would be screened so you don't see into our lot there to hide the trucks and things like that.
And on the far northwest corner there, which you're showing right now, you'll have some, yeah, you'll have some in there too.
Right.
Okay, I think those are in your plan.
I'll remind everybody though that Corning Avenue goes to the bridge to nowhere and it's a
Right.
pure industrial site that is really a difficult site there.
Right.
That'd be the only trees within 5
Right.
block area.
Right.
At
Yep.
that corner there. So.
And it sounds like the city owns that corner now, so you'd have to negotiate with them as well if you want to, quote, take care of it and da-da-da-da.
Absolutely, but I don't think I'll get much argument.
No,
from them
probably
on
not.
that.
All right, thank you.
Brooke?
Can you expand on what you said earlier, that you had a talk with the city and this existing building was grandfathered, and did you assume that being told that the parking, et cetera, was grandfathered?
In our pre-app meeting, we were very clear on that parking because that's vital to customers and vendors getting in and out of our facility. And they told us that it was grandfathered, it was an existing building and it was grandfathered.
And you showed them the addition at that time also?
It was a sketch, just a very, very basic architectural drawing. I hadn't spent $30,000 for plans at that point, but it was never, ever shown to the city that it was going to be a separate building.
That was my question. So, okay, that's all I have to say right now.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you. Is there anybody else here to speak in support? Is there anybody here to speak in opposition? Any last questions for staff?
Yeah, I'd like staff to speak to Mr. Gussman on meeting with the city and why he felt that this was grandfathered, and who did he meet with?
The way the pre-apps work, Brooke, is that we have people there from our building department that do the building plan review. We have people from fire prevention, Des Moines Water Works, city engineering, city traffic engineering. We have planning staff there. We have engineering review staff. So we look at this and we look at, whatever information is there at the time. We explained it needed to go to the board to get relief of that. The grandfathered components, the building code looks at things a little differently. When something goes out of use or is vacant for a while, they don't lose their rights to reoccupy with the same use, okay? Or making changes to something else outside of what's there already doesn't trigger conformance necessarily within the existing building. I think traffic probably stated that they're okay with leaving this as is. They don't speak to the zoning aspects of it. So it's really the zoning aspect of it that triggered the need to conform with the maneuvering, which the zoning ordinance states the maneuvering can't occur within the right-of-way. There is some allowance for the city traffic engineer to release that the way it's written. So if you look at the definition as it's in your applicables, the city traffic engineer could have approved that administratively, and you wouldn't have had to appeal that. After it was sent to Jennifer Bohack, she's not necessarily the one at the pre-app meetings to make the call right on the spot. She reviewed this and made the recommendation that it be the 45-degree angle. So she could actually, if the variance wasn't granted, she could support it being 45 and remain as is, basically, is what she indicated in her communication. So I guess my defense of the whole pre-app is that we can't catch every little aspect of everything in the amount of review time that we have in that meeting, 45 minutes. We didn't have anything as extensive as the drawing that we had here. So there's a little bit of a disclaimer on some things we can't. What we try to do is when we catch something to bring it to their attention as
quick as we can.
Wouldn't the zoning was the zoning pointed out at this point?
Yeah, it was, as he had mentioned, it was indicated they would have to go to the Board of Adjustment. It was in the minutes and the notes. Again, we don't drill down to every specific element of it because, again, the design of it isn't firm at that point in time. So we try to give them as much information so they understand the processes they may have to follow, the standards they'll have to meet that we would expect.
Okay.
They did come in and then with a request to waive some of the landscaping requirements, which is something that we can waive administratively under our site plan administration or review of the site plan. And that's when it was realized that, hey, we have to get this relief first. So this will come back then one way or the other as a site plan for that expansion. There'll be some ability to waive, the number of plantings. Actually, the way the site plan standards work, there would be a 7 or a 10-foot setback here required. The zoning is the hard 5-foot standard that's been there since before we even had landscaping standards. So we've seen a number of appeals of that in recent years. So it's not unusual for somebody to appeal the 5-foot setback. In this case, it's not a car lot, it's a heating and cooling business. So,
Any other questions for staff?
No.
Thanks, Eric. Close the public portion, go to board decision then.
I have some comments.
Go right ahead.
I'm just absolutely appalled that we do everything we can to get a very old established business out of the city. And I see it more than once. And I'm just flabbergasted, to be real honest, of how this process went and where they're at today. If it wasn't for Mr. Bell and talking to Mr. Gustman about taking over that land, he would have been in Ankeny by now. And he's put in several $100,000 into the building. He's a good corporate citizen. If we want that whole area just to rot and go away, I guess that's up to the city. But I just am appalled that we do this to very old established businesses or any business and drag them through this without what I think is proper instructions. And I'm not picking on the staff because the staff and I have talked about this. It could be in a booklet form, it could be anything, a checklist, so people can understand the codes and the zoning and the setback and you got to have 4 evergreens within 5 feet. I just don't get it.
Well, thank goodness there's a Board of Adjustment to rectify that wrong.
Well, I'm amazed, yeah.
I agree. You see how people pay lots of money to have businesses come to town, and we don't do as good a job as we could to keep businesses in. So, I think the presentation was absolutely great, but that's why we're here. Staff does their part to make sure that all the variances and exceptions were identified. It's our job to place our decision, our background knowledge, and put something to good use on that. So, Jake.
I have a clarifying question. I'm not sure if it goes to you or if it goes to the applicant, but we saw a plan for both the angled parking as well as maintaining something very close to what exists currently on the northern half of the site. What is the desire? Is it?
Our desire is to keep the head-in parking because we need the parking spaces, and it is absolutely my belief that the head-in parking is way safer than the diagonal parking, given coming down that 167. And with the Iowa roofing building there, if you parallel park or you diagonal park in there, you cannot see past the Iowa roofing building. Backing out, you can back out far enough that you can see coming down the hill.
And I can't speak to the safety, but I think when you change a pattern that's been in existence for 56 years, you're going to change the safety. Even if you're trying to make it better, I think that makes it worse, I think. So I appreciate the clarification, so.
Eric, can you put that plan back up that had the head-in parking, their colored diagram?
Which one, the 45 or the?
No, the straight in 90 perpendicular. I'd like to find a way to approve this plan. I'm a guy who likes his 5-foot green space setback, but we got to have room to maneuver, we got to have room to get in and out. You do have some limitations on the size of the property that would impact how vehicles would move. I'd like to find a way, whatever language it takes, to approve that if that's the kind of plan the owner would like to see. Would you like to see this one approved?
This plan is, yes, that's what we'd like to see.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
One of the
Figure out a
things
way
I
to
might
improve that.
suggest, just looking at that, is that they group their accessible spaces and share a maneuvering space. They may actually gain a space.
So you can overlap the.
If that works to everybody's
Just so
benefit.
I mean, right now, an accessible space is going across a drive aisle that would have a truck possibly going through it. Or,
Yeah, right.
We need to speak to that.
The existing slopes that are currently there today
So it's a slope issue? Okay.
Okay.
So they have to look at a 2%
Sure.
slope minimum all
So
the
it'd
way
be
from
too
there
great
to
then.
the entrance of the building. So
Okay.
there is, that's why we evaluate this administratively,
Sure.
because.
And
it'd be up
this
there
would
all-
primarily be customer parking these straight in. So your staff, your service techs aren't going to be parking here. So the odds are if we had two people who would need that at the same time, probably won't, I would hope wouldn't happen.
On one hand, the number of handicapped people that have ever been in our building.
I think the other option they would have.
Although
is
they're very
putting-
welcome, right?
The other option they would have is putting one in the yard for one of their employees
Okay.
too, so.
But there wouldn't be anything that would prevent us from making a motion to approve this plan as we've seen with the variances.
If you do that, I would say make it in substantial compliance with what you're seeing.
Okay.
So that we have some direction then when we do the site plan review.
And I certainly understand where staff is coming from in general. And I'm guessing it wasn't Mr. Gassman's intention to just want to leave Des Moines. I'm guessing you were looking at, hey, I just got to have a bigger facility. And I went up to Adams to get some door parts, and he had told me about this empty building up there. So I thought that was interesting. So I'm not sure how to do this aside from making a motion to grant.
Before we do.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr.
We
Chair.
just want to make sure that we're all done with Eric, so.
Yeah, are we?
Yeah, I mean, do you
Okay.
even have any other questions or?
Nope, we'll close the public portion, go to board decision then. So Mel, now you can take off.
Okay, for the appeals we've got here, I'd like to make a motion to grant the variances as necessary to allow the applicant to proceed with initiation of the plan we see here in substantial conformance with what's been presented.
Live with that, Eric?
I think I can live with whatever the board does, because that's our job.
Okay,
Sound like a politician.
it's been seconded.
The board is the final determination, so we.
Well, aren't you nice?
From that.
Okay.
Jake, you seconded it? Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Quickly, approval of the minutes from last month.
I'll move.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. I think we're done,
Get
folks.
to the bank and.
I didn't get fired either, look at that. Meeting's adjourned.
So.